Ray and Josie had spent 40 years together, raising 2 children, Christine and Leo, and enjoying the fruits of their hard work. Ray, now retired, stayed active by playing golf despite some heart problems. Josie, energetic for her age, focused on maintaining their home. Though their marriage had faced challenges, it had settled into a familiar routine. However, cracks started to form. Josie, once content with their slower lifestyle, began to crave more. Ray believed they had adjusted to his health limitations, but Josie felt otherwise. Her growing dissatisfaction went unnoticed by Ray, creating an emotional distance that opened the door to something unexpected. One morning, Ray's golf game was canceled due to heavy rain. Disappointed, he returned home earlier than usual, not bothering to warn Josie. When he entered the house, he was stunned to see Josie in a pink silk robe, standing with a much younger man. At 59, Josie still had an attractive figure, which clearly hadn't gone unnoticed by this stranger. As Ray walked in, Josie greeted him with a smile and attempted to kiss him, but he pulled away. "Are you out of your mind, Josie? I'd rather not know where your mouth's been, though I can guess," Ray said, disgusted. Realizing what she had nearly done, Josie quickly introduced the young man, Luke, to her husband. Luke was about an inch shorter than Ray, but his fit, athletic build showed he was likely in his 20s or 30s, possibly a former college athlete. His short brown hair and average face didn't stand out, but he confidently placed a hand on Ray's shoulder. Ray held back the urge to react violently. "Nice to meet you. Josie has told me a lot about you. Don't worry, in 25 or 30 years, I'll probably have the same issues you think I have." Ray missed the closeness with Josie, but thought they were doing fine with some adjustments. Luke's smug smile irritated him, but Ray kept his cool. "Luke, get out of my house. If I see you here again, I'll eliminate you. I have a weapon." Luke's grin vanished as he quickly left, mumbling, "I thought you didn't mind." Ray locked the door and stormed to his bedroom, furious that Josie seemed unbothered by what had just happened. She followed him in, now with her robe closed. "That was rude," she remarked. Ray, still in disbelief, snapped, "Rude? I walk in on you with some guy you just slept with and I'm the rude one? You're out of your mind." Josie softened, trying to touch Ray's shoulder, but he pulled away. "I'm sorry, Ray. What we had was nice, but it wasn't enough for me." "You could have told me that. Where did you even find this guy?" "He's a friend of Marjorie's. When she didn't want him, she gave me his information." "He's just using you for easy Zex." "Maybe, but I'm using him too. So what difference does it make?" Josie said calmly. "How long has this been going on?" "A few months. He comes when you're golfing, takes care of me, and leaves before you're back. It doesn't affect you. You get your exercise, I get mine." Ray suddenly realized why Saturdays had become linen-changing days. "I don't care if I'm not here. I'm done with this. I'll give up golf if I have to." "Ray, be smart. You need your golf. This works for both of us." "Maybe for you, Josephine, but not for me. This was the last time." Ray went to his room to shower and change into something casual. Meanwhile, Josie dressed and drove to Christine's house, where her daughter lived with her husband and 2 daughters. By the time Ray finished showering, the house was empty. With no note left, he assumed Josie needed space, which suited him fine since he felt the same. The shower helped Ray calm down. While he understood Josie's needs, he couldn't justify her actions. He knew he wouldn't have done the same if their roles were reversed, and he wasn't willing to overlook her betrayal. The next day was the 4th of July, a holiday the family had always celebrated together. Ray prepped marinated chicken, hamburgers, and hot dogs for the younger kids, eager to spend time with everyone. The barbecue went smoothly, with friends and family gathering. Josie looked radiant, laughing and smiling as if nothing had happened. Though Ray was still hurt by what he'd discovered, he considered forgiving her once, given their long marriage. As guests began to leave, Ray excused himself for a nap, wanting to rest before the evening fireworks. After a couple of hours, he woke feeling refreshed, ready to enjoy the night. He changed and went to the living room where his family sat around the table. Josie was at the far end, with his granddaughters Julia and Allison, Christine and her husband Eric, and his son Leo and wife Rebecca. The atmosphere felt heavy, and Ray realized they were staging an intervention. Christine spoke first. "We need to talk about Mom." Ray glanced at Josie, her face unreadable, and then back at his daughter. "What about Mom?" "She told us about Luke," Christine said. Ray was stunned. "She told you?" "Yes, and about your issues," Christine confirmed. Ray stared at his wife, stunned that she had shared such personal details with their family. "My problems? This doesn't concern any of you." "But Mom's happiness does," Christine responded. Ray turned to Josie. Are you unhappy? I am happy, Ray. Please don't doubt that, Josie replied. Christine interrupted again. But Mom has needs, and well, you can't meet them, isn't that true? So I'm selfish for not accepting this? We're not labeling it that way, Dad. We're just saying you should support Mom taking care of things quietly, since you can't, Christine explained. Ray looked around the room, realizing his family seemed to accept, or at least tolerate, Josie's infidelity. He felt older and more defeated than ever. Do you all agree? Ray asked, searching their faces. They nodded, though some hesitated. He needed clarity. Leo, do you agree with this? Ray asked his son. Yes, it'll help Mom, Leo said. Eric? Ray turned to his son-in-law, expecting no disagreement. I don't see it being a big problem, Eric replied. Rebecca? Ray asked his daughter-in-law, who seemed to shy away. Well, as long as she's discreet, Rebecca said uncertainly. Finally, Ray turned to his granddaughters. They were part of a different generation, and he wasn't sure where they stood on this issue. What about you girls? Grandpa, we shouldn't be involved, Julia, the eldest, said. Come on, you're almost adults. I'm sure you have opinions, Ray pressed. Julia and Allison exchanged glances, then looked at their parents, who urged them to speak. Ray knew what was coming. They had been convinced to side with their grandmother. Well, a lot of our friends are fine with their partners seeing other people. It's just Zex, Julia finally said. It's just Zex. Ray had expected to hear this eventually. Josie had clearly manipulated everyone to get her way and keep her affair going. Realizing there was no point in arguing, Ray looked at Josie, who was watching him eagerly. That's it, Josephine. Majority rules. You'll get what you want. Josie's face lit up with satisfaction. Ray turned to leave, but heard her call his name. For a moment, he hoped she might reconsider, but instead she asked, Can I tell Luke you were joking about eliminating him? Sure, I'm going for a drive. Dad, it's time for the fireworks, Leo reminded him. Go without me. I don't want to go, Ray replied. As he left the house, he heard cheers behind him. Glancing through the window, he saw Josie being hugged by the family, united in their support of her affair. She was already calling Luke to confirm their next meeting, assuring him that Ray had backed down. The family piled into the car, chatting and laughing as they headed to the fireworks, confident Ray would come around. Meanwhile, Ray drove to a quiet hill overlooking the city, a place he often went to think. He was deeply hurt by his family's betrayal, feeling cast aside and useless. Their support of Josie's infidelity made him feel like an outsider, as if he had been discarded, much like the old stories of elders being abandoned when they were no longer seen as useful. All Ray wanted was to sleep, but napping during the day had its downsides. It was after midnight when he finally returned home. He saw that Christine's car was still there along with Josie's, but everyone else had left. As he approached, Josie opened the front door, likely alerted by the sound of his car alarm. Where have you been? I was so worried, she said. Ray walked past her without responding. Christine sat on the sofa, looking at him curiously. Why are you still here? He asked. Mom was worried when you didn't come back after the fireworks. Everyone else had to leave early, so I stayed. You could have answered your phone, Christine replied. Ray glanced at his phone, remembering he'd turned it off earlier. As you can see, I'm fine. You can go home. Christine was shocked. Her father was usually kind and polite, but this was different. She watched him head to his bedroom and shut the door. She grabbed her purse, kissed her mom goodbye, and left. By the time Josie finished cleaning, Ray was already asleep. The house remained quiet the following week. Josie knew Ray wasn't happy with her affair, but believed he would come to terms with it because he loved her. She was confident he would eventually forget or push it aside. For Ray, though, it felt like his life had crumbled. After decades of being a devoted family man, he was now cast aside by the very people he had prioritized. Josie's decision to involve the family in her affair marked the end of their marriage in his eyes. Their support of her betrayal shattered his sense of belonging in the family. Everything he had built was slipping away. On Saturday, Ray followed his routine and drove to the country club to meet his golf group. These were 8 older men who mixed up their foursomes weekly. Though Ray tried to focus on the game, he knew exactly what was happening at home. His performance wasn't the worst, but it was the worst he'd had in a while. Smiling through the light-hearted jokes felt nearly impossible. Josie watched Ray leave for golf at 7 a.m., hoping to show affection with a kiss, but he remained cold and distant. Though she hated hurting him, she pushed the thought aside. When Luke arrived, she had him parked down the street to avoid attracting attention. After he knocked, she let him in, wearing only a robe. which quickly ended up on the floor as they kissed passionately. Luke lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bedroom, where their encounter lasted about 2 hours. Afterward, Luke showered while Josie made the bed and started laundry. By the time Ray was expected home, everything was in order. When Ray didn't return by 2 o'clock, Josie became slightly concerned. By 3 o'clock, she started calling him, but all calls went to voicemail. By 5 o'clock, with still no word, her worry grew. By 7 o'clock, she called Christine for help. Soon, Christine, her husband Eric, and their daughters were at Josie's house. Eric went to the country club where he learned Ray had left hours earlier. Christine called the police, but they couldn't officially file a missing person report yet. With no way to reach Ray's golfing friends, the family was left to wait anxiously. Around 11 p.m., Julia saw headlights coming up the driveway. Sensing a confrontation, she and her sister went upstairs, while Eric, already asleep, stayed in Leo's old room. Only Josie and Christine remained to face Ray. Ray entered the house, unsurprised to see Josie waiting in the hallway and only mildly surprised to find Christine still there. He had seen her car outside but assumed she might leave them alone. Clearly, she was staying to support her mother. "Where have you been?" Josie snapped. "I was playing golf," Ray replied calmly. "Not afternoon, you weren't there anymore." "True. After golf, I had lunch at the clubhouse. Then I saw the new Dwayne Johnson movie. Not bad, a bit cliched, though." "I don't care about the details, Raymond," Josie shot back. "You asked where I was," Ray muttered. "I want to know why you didn't come home and why you ignored your phone." "My phone didn't ring," Ray said, showing her it was off. "And I didn't come home because I didn't want to be here when your friend was—" Josie, frustrated, said, "Everything was cleaned up long before you finished golf. There was no reason for you to stay out all day." "As I said, I won't be here at the same time as your friend. It's late. I'm going to bed." Ray walked past Josie, briefly meeting Christine's gaze but saying nothing as he went to the bedroom. He expected one of them to follow, but neither did. As he got ready for bed, he overheard voices in the hallway and realized Christine's family was gathered in the house. Great, he thought. By the time Josie came to bed, Ray was already asleep, or pretending to be. She considered waking him to talk, but decided against it. The following weekend passed similarly. Josie neither called nor texted. She had accepted that Ray would be gone all day and used the time to thoroughly clean the house again. However, as the day dragged on, Josie started feeling uneasy being alone. So she called Christine, who agreed to come over and keep her company until Ray got back. Eric and the girls stayed home, but Christine came to support her mother. Ray arrived home around 11 p.m., surprised to see Christine's car parked at the curb again. He wondered if another confrontation was brewing. Walking through the door, he was greeted by Josie's warm smile and a kiss on the cheek, with Christine smiling in the background. "Why don't you change, love? Then you can tell me what you've been up to all day," Josie said softly, almost cheerfully. Ray was a bit confused. Josie seemed more relaxed than usual, her good mood intact. It didn't take him long to assume she'd had her usual meeting with Luke earlier in the day, which had left her in high spirits. Sighing, Ray went to the bedroom to change into his pajamas. When he returned to the living room, Christine was still there, seemingly waiting to speak to him before leaving. She hesitated for a moment and then said, "Dad, I know this is tough for you, but I just want to say how amazing it is that you show your love for Mom by letting her do this. It's really helped her." Ray stared at his daughter, shocked. "Letting her? Is that how you see it now?" He felt the weight of Christine's words sink in. They thought he was allowing it, as if he had given his approval for the affair. He couldn't believe the situation had reached this point. He realized they all believed he had accepted it. Looking at Christine, his voice heavy with resignation, he said, "I'm telling you now, Christine, this is the last conversation we'll have on this topic. The last. Make sure everyone knows." Christine, taken aback by her father's stern tone, nodded in understanding. "Of course, Dad, I get it. It's hard to forget if people keep bringing it up. I'll tell everyone." With that, she kissed him on the cheek and left. A moment later, Josie came in with drinks for both of them. Ray couldn't help but think Josie had planned for Christine to speak to him first. He drank his water in silence, watching Josie move around the room with her usual ease, seemingly unaware of the tension still gnawing at him. This pattern continued for months. Josie enjoyed her relationship with Luke, while Ray found new ways to occupy his time. He still played golf every Saturday morning and watched movies, but he began exploring other activities as well. He tried mini-golf, bowling, and even arcade games. He wasn't very good at them, but he had fun. finding some solace in these new distractions. At home, life settled into a routine, or at least what passed for normal. Luke was never mentioned. Every evening, Ray and Josie had dinner together and pleasant, if ordinary, conversations. Their closeness had shifted, but Josie, convinced her relationship with Luke didn't affect her marriage, continued showing love and affection toward Ray. If she noticed that Ray rarely reciprocated, she didn't mention it, perhaps too comfortable in the situation she had created. Maybe because Ray never brought up Luke, she believed he was more okay with it than he really was. Ray was in for a shock when Thanksgiving arrived. "Mom, Luke's here," Christine called from the front of the house. Ray, sitting in a chair reading the newspaper, froze. If he had been drinking something, he would have spat it out. His hands tightened around the paper as the words echoed in his head. "Oh, good," Josie said. "I wasn't sure he'd make it." Ray felt a surge of anger rise in him. He pressed the lever on the chair, lowering the footrest, and stood up, seething. "What the hell is he doing here?" he demanded, glaring at Josie. "I invited him for Thanksgiving," she replied calmly. "He doesn't have family in town, and he had nowhere to go. I told you I wouldn't be here at the same time as him. That's why I'm not around on Saturdays." Ray's voice trembled with rage. "And now you invite him to my house for a family holiday?" "This is my home too, Raymond. He's not here for Zex. It's just dinner. I expect you to behave," Josie said coldly, standing firm. Ray couldn't believe what he was hearing. Josie turned and walked to the front door to greet Luke, introducing him to their children, their spouses, and their granddaughters, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. She took Luke's hand and led him into the living room to meet Ray. But when they turned the corner, Ray was no longer there, or at least not in the chair where he had been moments before. Josie looked around, puzzled, before realizing he had left. She headed to the kitchen, hearing the garage door motor start. She arrived just in time to see the door lowering as Ray's car pulled out of the driveway. "Was that Dad who just left?" Christine asked, noticing the taillights disappear. "Yes, it was," Josie responded irritably, heading to her bedroom to gather her thoughts. Luke, looking uneasy, approached Christine. "Should I go? Maybe it'd be better if I left," he asked. "No, Luke, it's fine. This is my dad's problem, not yours. You're always welcome here." Luke hesitated, clearly not wanting to cause more trouble, but when Christine reassured him, he nodded and stayed. The family and Luke bonded over dinner, and despite the underlying tension, the evening went smoothly. Luke engaged with Leo and Eric, chatting about football while the women went shopping. No one noticed when Ray's car passed by later that night. By the time everyone returned from shopping, Leo and Eric had dozed off on the couch, and Ray was still gone. Concerned, Christine woke her husband and kids, sending them home, but she stayed behind to keep her mother company. Leo and Rebecca left, leaving the house quiet as Josie and Christine waited for Ray. Ray came home around midnight, hoping Josie had gone to bed by then, but as soon as he stepped inside, she was there waiting. "Where have you been all day?" she demanded, her voice sharp with frustration. "I went to Denny's for Thanksgiving dinner, then caught a few movies," Ray replied calmly. "We had a great meal right here, and you went to Denny's? Why would you do that?" "It's not about the food, Josephine. It's about the company." Josie's frustration peaked. "I can't believe a 64-year-old man can't be polite to a guest I invited into our home. I would never treat someone you invited like that." "I told you I wouldn't be in this house at the same time as him. That didn't just mean when he's here for Zex. I meant any time, and you knew that. Yet you did it anyway. It was just dinner, Ray. Maybe for you," Ray said, raising his newspaper between them, ending the conversation. After 5 minutes of silence, Christine knelt beside him, her voice soft, almost childlike. "Dad, please try to understand that he means a lot to her. She doesn't love him, but she cares about him. She didn't want him to be alone for the holiday." Ray sighed. "And you don't think there's a problem with Mom's friend becoming part of the family?" "He's not family, Dad. He's just a friend like anyone else." Ray realized the argument was over. "Of course, Christine. I understand." Christine looked relieved. "I hope so, Dad. See you later." She kissed him on the cheek and left. Josie didn't appear again that night. When Ray finally dragged himself to bed, Josie was already asleep. Thanksgiving marked a turning point in some ways. Displays of affection between Ray and Josie almost vanished. They lived more like neighbors than a married couple. Josie believed her decision to have a lover was justified by Ray's condition, viewing his reaction as selfish and driven by pride. Ray, however, saw it as the ultimate betrayal of their decades-long marriage. They only communicated when necessary. and the love that had sustained them for over 40 years had faded. When Josie mentioned needing to do last-minute shopping on Christmas Eve, Ray didn't say a word, although she hadn't needed to do that in years. He knew where she was going. He didn't have to follow her or check her phone. Her expression told him everything. Whether she planned to exchange gifts or something more, he wasn't sure, but he knew she would have a private celebration with Luke on New Year's Eve. Ray kissed his wife at midnight, though without the passion of past years. Josie felt disappointed she couldn't express her feelings to Luke, but she still called him the next day to wish him a happy new year. With Valentine's Day approaching, Ray planned a nice dinner at a fancy seafood restaurant, and Josie looked forward to it, thinking maybe her husband was coming back to her. But Ray had lingering suspicions. Josie's desire to spend holidays with her lover made him suspicious about Valentine's Day. He doubted she'd let the day pass without seeing Luke. So Ray left the office for a bit to watch the house. He parked at the end of the street with a clear view of the front door. Sure enough, Luke parked around the corner and walked to the house. Ray half expected him to walk right in, but instead Luke knocked, and Josie let him in. Ray doubted they were just going to talk. It was their personal Valentine's Day celebration. Apparently, they weren't just casual lovers anymore. That evening's dinner was subdued. Josie approached Ray with hope, thinking they might rekindle their relationship, but the good mood he'd shown over the past few days was gone. Josie was disappointed but tried to make the best of it, wondering what had changed. With no small children around, Easter was just an excuse for a big family dinner. They hid a few large plastic eggs in the yard, usually containing gift cards or something similar. It was just for fun and to get into the holiday spirit. To Ray's relief, Luke wasn't invited. Josie had at least respected that after the Thanksgiving disaster. But Ray knew she met him on days other than Saturday mornings, maybe more often than he realized. She had done it for Valentine's Day, and she could easily do it on other days as well. After the morning festivities ended, Ray announced he was going to lie down. While he was a little tired, it was nothing he couldn't handle. He mainly wanted to avoid being around the family that had betrayed him. He couldn't avoid them completely, but he could limit his time with them. It was a beautiful day, so he opened a window overlooking the backyard, letting a cool breeze in. Unfortunately, he also overheard Josie and Christine's conversation. "So, how's Luke doing?" he heard Christine ask. "Shh, not too loud. I don't want your father to hear." Okay, Christine replied, lowering her voice, but still loud enough for Ray to hear. "I just can't believe my mom has a boyfriend 10 years younger than me." "He's not my boyfriend, Christine. He just..." "Come on, Mom. You sleep with him 2-3 times a week, and you both go out to dinner. You might not want to call him your boyfriend, but that's what he is." Okay, he's my boyfriend. I just want to be considerate of your father's feelings." "I know, Mom. I love Dad too, and I don't want him to get hurt. But let's be honest. He's an old man, and you're still young." "He's only 5 years older than me, Christine." "In actual age, yes. But you're active, and he can barely get through the day without a nap. You deserve this. Honestly, I'm a little jealous you're dating again." "Does anyone else know? I mean, other than Saturday mornings, Leo, Eric, Rebecca." "No, I don't involve them." "Does everyone agree with this?" "Leo and Eric think it's fine. They agree that I should meet my needs since Dad can't anymore. Rebecca's the only one who thinks it's wrong, but she doesn't want to hurt Dad, so she won't say anything. What Dad doesn't know won't hurt him." Hearing how deep Josie's betrayal ran, and how Christine fully supported her mother's affair, Ray felt the last bits of love and affection for them leave his heart. Though he had made tentative plans before, out of love for his family and his long marriage to Josie, he had held back. Now, it was time to begin his final plans in earnest. Ray quietly closed the window and lay down. Over the next few months, Ray's relationships with Josie and Christine deteriorated further. Things weren't much better with his sons and son-in-law, but he tried to improve things with Rebecca and his granddaughters, believing they were too young to fully understand the situation. Mother's Day had its own traditions in Ray's family. For them, it meant brunch at an upscale French-themed restaurant. The food and service were excellent, with prices to match. When the kids were younger, Ray used to take the family out to celebrate with Josie. As the kids grew up and started working, they took over the tradition, doing the same for Father's Day. The family had an unusual arrangement. The other parent didn't attend the celebration. Years ago, Ray stopped going to Mother's Day, and Josie stopped attending Father's Day. The kids celebrated with each parent separately, and Ray had always been fine with that until this year. He had a feeling, based on recent events, that something wasn't right. So instead of spending his usual free time reading, Ray dressed and headed to the restaurant. Josie had been gone about 30 minutes, so he knew she'd be there. He didn't plan on participating or even letting anyone know he was there. In fact, he doubted he'd even have to get out of the car. He drove around the parking lot, easily spotting Christine and Eric's car, then Josie's car, followed by Leo and Rebecca's. Ray began to hope he was wrong, but then he saw what he had feared, tucked away in a corner parking spot, Luke's car. Ray had seen it enough times to recognize the license plate. His wife, or maybe his daughter, had invited her lover to a family event, fully knowing Ray wouldn't be there. Despite all that had happened, and despite Ray's fading love for Josie, this new betrayal filled him with rage. Any plans to temper his actions vanished. Ray returned home, grabbed his golf clubs, and headed to the local course. He went through several buckets of balls, losing count. By the end, he was exhausted. His shots weren't very far or accurate, but he felt better. He drove home ready for a nap. They considered him useless, thinking he couldn't get through a day without rest. He'd let them continue to think that. Josie greeted him when he walked in. He wondered if she had a private celebration planned with Luke, though he no longer cared. It still hurt, but it wasn't worth worrying about anymore. As he walked through the door, he wondered if she'd admit to inviting Luke if given the chance. "How was Mother's Day with your family?" Ray asked, putting slight emphasis on family. "It was wonderful, Ray. Thanks for asking. I had a great time with the kids," Josie replied. She didn't mention Luke. Did this mean the family now considered him part of it? Or had she just decided not to mention him? Ray realized he would never know. He went to the bedroom and took a nap. Soon, the 4th of July came around again. Josie was in a good mood, and Ray knew why. He had stayed by her side for nearly a year now, and Josie undoubtedly thought she had it all figured out. She had a husband who supported her, and a younger man she met with several times a week. In her mind, her life was nearly perfect. Luke had started a new evening job, allowing him to spend a few half-days a week with Josie. Though the pay wasn't much, that wasn't why she was with him. To avoid rubbing it in Ray's face, they mostly stayed out of Josie's bedroom, except for their Saturday matinees. They used Luke's apartment or borrowed a friend's place when necessary, since Luke had roommates. The hardest part for Josie was excluding Luke from family events. She didn't bring it up with Ray again, knowing he wouldn't change his mind, and that was the only thing that really upset her. At first, and even now, she hoped Ray and Luke could at least become acquaintances, if not friends. In her view, they weren't competing. Luke gave her one thing and Ray gave her another, so she spent her days with Luke and evenings and weekends with Ray. She didn't understand why it couldn't work, so reluctantly, she didn't invite Luke to the family barbecue and fireworks outing. The family arrived early to help with meal preparations, and Ray made sure to stay visible and active, ensuring no one could doubt later that he was tired. He carefully watched the crowd, wondering if Josie might sneak Luke in, but he never showed up. As the day wore on, Ray pretended to get more tired. Although some of it was real, much of it was exaggerated. Maybe he overdid it, as Josie seemed to notice and approached him. "Honey, why don't you lie down and relax before the fireworks?" she suggested gently. The hardest part of all this for Ray was knowing Josie still loved and cared about him, which made what he was about to do even tougher. "I'm not going to the fireworks. I just want to enjoy the day with my family and head to bed early." "Ray, are you sure? You missed them last year. But before that, you always loved going," Josie said, genuinely concerned. "Yeah, I'm sure. I guess I'm just getting old, but everyone else will have a great time without me." "Okay, if you're sure." As soon as she left him, Ray watched her weave through the crowd and searching for Christine. He realized Josie was trying to confirm if he would attend the fireworks because she planned to invite Luke. Even though it didn't change anything, the fresh betrayal stung deeply. As the evening progressed, most guests left, leaving only family. Josie, Christine, Leo, and Eric all stopped by to ask Ray again if he wanted to join them for the fireworks, expressing how much they'd miss him. Ray saw through it, realizing his family was slipping away from him. As they prepared to leave, he swallowed his anger and said a few words to each family member. Despite the past year, he cherished the memories of their time together and would miss those moments. He hugged his granddaughters the longest. Ray watched with a heavy heart as the family piled into Christine's minivan, laughing and happy, not even noticing his absence. He tried to push them from his mind and focused on his next steps. The family returned later than usual, giving Josie time alone with Luke. Luke thanked them for including him, especially since he had no close family nearby. Although only Josie spent much time with him, the family had come to accept him as part of their extended circle and appreciated how happy he made Josie. They said their goodbyes at the park since he couldn't come back to the house. When the family got home, they tried to be quiet so as not to disturb Ray. They poured drinks and sat around the dining room table to chat for 30 to 45 minutes before Josie suddenly remembered Ray and asked Leo to check on him. Leo got up and slowly walked into the bedroom. He didn't find Ray asleep, but noticed the bedspread pulled back, revealing the snow-white sheets Josie always insisted on. On the bed, he saw Ray's wedding ring and a flash drive. This wasn't a good sign. "He's not there," Leo said when he returned. "What do you mean he's not there?" Josie asked. "He's gone, Mom. No one's been in the bed, and I found this on the sheets," Leo replied, holding up the ring and flash drive. Not fully believing it, Josie rushed to the bedroom and saw for herself that the bed was unused. When she returned to the living room, Eric was already connecting the flash drive to the laptop. The drive contained only one large file. Josie nodded to Eric and he double-clicked it. The video began playing, and at first they saw a blank wall but heard voices. Moments later, Ray appeared on camera. "Is it recording?" Ray asked someone off-screen. "Yes," a woman's voice replied. Ray turned to the camera. "Good evening, everyone. If I've timed this right, you're watching this a little after 10 p.m., just back from the fireworks show." Everyone reflexively looked at the clock and saw it was nearly 11 p.m. They hadn't bothered to check on Ray when they got home. "At this moment, I'm on a plane flying far beyond the borders of the United States. In case you're wondering, I won't be coming back." "No," Josie cried, breaking into tears. "You betrayed me." The video continued. "Each of you, my wife, who had my love and support for over 40 years, never having to work a day outside of raising our children, threw me aside like trash for a man half my age. And when I dared to object, you turned the whole family against me. I thought 40 years of loyalty, dedication, faithfulness, and support would mean something to you, Josephine. I deserved better, your desires, and let's be honest, they were wants, not needs, should have taken a back seat to my feelings. Doing this behind my back was bad enough, but forcing the family to side with you was even worse. That day felt like 7 knives stabbed into my heart. Christine, your betrayal hurt just as much as your mother's. Growing up, you were always Daddy's girl. We did everything together. Knowing that you supported your mother in cheating on me, your own father, broke my heart more than anything she did." "I didn't say that," Christine exclaimed. "Never." Ray's voice pressed on in the video. "Leo, Eric, you two must be the biggest idiots in the world. Do you even realize that by supporting this, you gave your wives permission to cheat on you? Leo, I don't think Rebecca would do this, but after what I've heard from Christine, you should be concerned. Eric, if Christine ever claims you're not satisfying her, she'll walk away. She's already told her mother how jealous she is." Eric looked over at Christine, who shook her head as Ray's words echoed through the room. "No, baby, I never said that. I would never do that," Christine protested. Ray's voice didn't waver. "And what about you, Eric? You can't really object to what's happening, can you? You've already said it's normal for Josie. Or is it only normal because it wasn't happening to you? What will happen when it's your turn?" Christine will deny she'd ever do such a thing, but ask her if she thinks it would be wrong for her. Why was it okay for her mother? Her answer will tell you everything. Eric paused the video and looked at his wife. "You said you were jealous of your mom?" "I don't remember exactly what I said. I just meant I was glad she was experiencing a new relationship and rediscovering herself." "So, do you want to rediscover yourself with someone else?" Eric asked. "No, baby. Please don't blow this out of proportion. I love you and don't want to be with anyone else. Unless I can't perform anymore, right? Honey, can we discuss this later? We need to focus on Mom right now." Ray's voice from the video cut through their conversation. "But this isn't over yet." Eric pressed play again and Ray's voice filled the room. "I didn't want to stay in a marriage where my wife cheated on me every week. I certainly wasn't going to stick around when I found out it was happening several times a week. Sorry, Josephine, but you weren't nearly as discreet as you thought. Inviting him to Mother's Day? That was tasteless. I won't tell you where I've gone, but even if you find me, there's nothing you can do about it. Everyone in the room sat in silence, tension thick in the air, as Ray continued. I should also mention the financial situation I left you with. I took most of our money because I intend to live the rest of my life in comfort, as a reward for putting everyone else first for decades. Josephine, I left you the house, which, as you know, is fully paid off and worth several $100,000. My lawyer will help you with the sale if you want. I also left $400,000 in the bank. That's $10,000 for every good year you gave me. Unfortunately, there haven't been any loans of goodwill in the last year. Don't worry about me. After taking the rest of our assets, including the investments, I'm sitting on nearly 8 figures. I'll be just fine, though I doubt any of you really care. The way I've been treated over the past year shows how you all truly feel about me. Everyone exchanged uneasy glances but remained silent. Oh, and if you're worried I'll spend my golden years alone, don't be. I already have a companion, and she's sitting next to me on the plane right now. Let me introduce her. Deborah. A woman's face appeared in the frame, matching the female voice from earlier. Hello, I'm Deborah. I'll be helping Ray spend what could have been your inheritance, she said, waving at the camera. She appeared to be in her mid-50s, an attractive brunette. Ray smiled at the camera before continuing. Deborah and I have been keeping each other company for the past 4 or 5 months, ever since I told her what my wife was doing. We've been spending a lot of time together and discovered how compatible we are. Josephine, you probably remember Deborah. You've met her several times. We worked together for over 30 years, since she was hired in the marketing department. She took early retirement to join me at my new home. We've been close friends all this time, and the best part? Deborah's needs are simple. Just affection, hugs, kisses, and maybe a few other things. I'm looking forward to it. Everyone in the room looked at Josie, gauging her reaction to Ray's revelation. It was clear from her expression that she wasn't taking it well. Eric paused the video. Mom, are you okay? Leo asked. No, Leo, I'm definitely not okay. But let's just finish this, she replied. Eric resumed the video, and Ray's voice grew more somber as he addressed Josie directly. Josephine, I loved you from the day we met. If anyone had told me you could treat me like this, I would have knocked them out before they could finish. I looked forward to spending our final years together with visits from our children and grandchildren and maybe great-grandchildren. I'm so disappointed that your physical desires ruined that for us, for me. I hope it was worth it for you. You should have enough money to live comfortably, especially if you sell the house. If you need more, I'm sure the children who supported your romance will support you financially as well. After all, it was my money that got them through college and into their good jobs, so I had a lot to do with that. The tension in the room thickened as Ray's voice continued. It was a terrible year, and things kept getting worse. I knew about the extra time you spend with him each week. I could have ended this months ago, but I liked the idea of declaring my independence on Independence Day, so I waited. Part of me will always love you, or at least what we had. I wish things were different, but somewhere along the way, you forgot that marriage is about us, not just you and me. I never made decisions that would benefit me and hurt you, unlike what you did with Luke. You probably thought I'd come to terms with it, maybe because I always sacrificed for you. But it doesn't matter now. It's done and can't be undone. For your sake, I hope it was worth it. Goodbye, Josephine. I'll miss you and what we could have had. Ray looked directly at the camera, and the screen went black. Everyone in the room was in tears, some more than others. None of them had expected Josie and Luke's relationship to drive Ray away. In the past, Ray had always conceded to Josie's wishes, and they assumed this time would be no different. Deep down, no one believed Ray had the guts to do anything but accept it. Tired and shaken, they all decided to stay overnight at Josie's house to support her. Rebecca was cleaning the kitchen when the phone rang. She usually only got calls from her husband Leo or the occasional telemarketer. The number was blocked, which struck her as odd, but she decided to answer. Hello, Rebecca answered the phone. Rebecca, it's Ray, came the familiar voice on the other end. "Oh God, Ray, how are you? Where are you?" Rebecca asked, concern clear in her voice. "I'm fine, Rebecca. Really, I am. But I can't tell you where I am right now. How are you?" Ray deflected. "I'm fine, Dad. I have news. I'm pregnant," Rebecca shared. "Congratulations. How far along are you?" Ray asked, the warmth evident. "Just a couple of months. We found out right after you left." "I can't believe it's been almost 3 weeks since you've been gone," Rebecca replied, her voice softening. "Yes, time flies. By the way, thanks for calling me Dad. I thought I'd lost that title," Ray said, gratitude in his tone. "Not with me, you haven't," Rebecca reassured him. "You know, Dad, I owe you an apology. I should have spoken up when everyone confronted you. It was wrong, but I was new to the family and scared," Rebecca admitted, her voice wavering slightly. "I had a feeling, but honestly, it wouldn't have changed anything. Josie and Christine were determined to push through with it." "You're forgiven," Ray said calmly. "Thank you, Dad. That means so much, especially because I want both grandfathers in my baby's life." "Will you be part of it?" Rebecca asked hopefully. "We'll see. I'm not coming back to the States, but maybe we can work something out." "I'd love to see you and the baby," Ray responded. "So, how are things over there?" Rebecca inquired. "In a word, tense," Ray sighed. "Josie isn't herself most of the time, though she still sees Luke several times a week. Christine and Eric are having problems, but they're keeping it under wraps. I think your comment about Christine looking for an excuse to cheat hit a nerve. How are you and Leo?" Rebecca switched topics. "We're fine. Still in the early stages of marriage, so it's fresh. Christine and Eric have been together longer, so maybe that makes them more cautious," Ray said. "The granddaughters are devastated, though," Rebecca added. "That surprises me." "You've always been close with them," Ray responded, surprised. "They miss spending time with you. They don't think casual sex is a big deal, but they understand it's different when you're married," Rebecca explained. "I get it. Christine's influence is clear in their reactions," Ray acknowledged. "Listen, could you gather everyone at your place tonight? I think I'm ready to talk." "I don't think that'll be a problem, Dad," Rebecca agreed. "Then we'll talk later," Ray concluded. That evening, the entire family gathered in Leo and Rebecca's living room. Rebecca had made it clear that Luke wasn't invited. Though she prepared sandwiches, the tension in the air left everyone too preoccupied to eat. At exactly 8 o'clock, the phone rang. Rebecca placed it on speaker. "Hi, Dad. Everyone's here," Rebecca announced. "Thanks, honey. Just so you all know, Deborah is with me. Let's try to have a polite conversation, not an argument." "Does everyone agree?" Ray asked. The family members murmured their agreement. "Good. I wanted to wait until some time had passed before we talked. I contacted Rebecca first because I sensed she wasn't as comfortable with all of this as the rest of you." "Leo, congratulations on the baby," Ray started. "Thanks, Dad. I'll try to live up to the standards of fatherhood you set." "And I mean that," Leo replied. "As they say, the best thing you can do for your children is to love their mother. Keep that in mind, and you'll do great," Ray advised. Ray then addressed his granddaughters. "Allison? Julia?" "Yes, Grandpa," they responded together. "Girls, I was disappointed you sided with your grandmother, but your aunts Rebecca and Deborah convinced me that you may have been pressured and didn't fully understand. You lack the life experience to comprehend the complexities of adulthood and a 40-year marriage. I still have your emails and phone numbers, so we can talk more about this later if that's okay." "Of course, Grandpa. We just miss you," Allison replied. "I miss you too. Why don't you both find something to do while the adults talk?" Ray suggested. The girls hugged their grandmother and said goodbye before leaving the room. "So," Ray continued, "does anyone have something they're dying to say?" "Ray, honey, please," Josie began, unsurprising to everyone. "Please come back. We can work through this. If you had told me you were really leaving, we could have fixed it." "Why did it have to go this far, Josephine?" "I told you I wouldn't accept this, but you turned to the family for support. You started inviting him to family events and seeing him multiple times a week. You replaced me with him when we were barely even roommates. I finally had enough. But you didn't say anything else. I thought you had accepted it. Thought it was just something I did," Josie said, her voice shaking. Ray looked at her, his tone firm. "It drove a wedge into our marriage, and there was no way out but this. From the moment you chose him over me, Our marriage was doomed. I'm so sorry, Ray. Can't we? Josie began, her voice filled with desperation. No, Josephine, we can't, Ray interrupted. Even if I wanted to, and I don't, I've made a commitment to Deborah and I intend to keep it. What about your commitment to me? You made that one first, Josie pressed, tears welling up. Yes, I did. And I would still be honoring it if you hadn't broken yours. But when you did, it freed me from mine and gave me the chance to make a new one, which I have, Ray responded. The room fell into a heavy silence, the only sound being Josie's soft sobs. Josie, Ray said gently, I'm sorry, but there's no point in continuing this. Whether you meant to or not, you pushed me away. There's no turning back. Without another word, Josie stood and quietly left the room, heading towards Christine and Eric's bedroom. Christine, watching her mother leave, spoke up, her voice cold. Very nice, Daddy. Did you call just to hurt Mom and make her cry? All because your ego couldn't handle another man making her feel better? Ray, unfazed, responded, Is that really how you see it, Christine? Eric, how's your ego holding up? Is it ready to accept another man making your wife feel better than you? Christine glanced at Eric, who remained silent. Throughout their marriage, Christine had always been the dominant partner, and Eric, like many husbands, had gone along with it. But recently there had been a shift, and Christine realized that their marriage was now in serious trouble. You can't support another woman's right to cheat without feeling at least a little guilt. Ray's words echoed in her mind. Her tone softened. No, Ray, that's not fair. You were right. I hadn't thought about it that way, she admitted quietly. For what it's worth, Ray, after all of this, Christine and I have been having serious issues, Eric finally spoke, breaking his silence. I understand, Ray replied, but let me tell you this. Fight for your marriage before it's too late. You two love each other, but you've started taking that for granted. I noticed it before all of this happened. Let this be a wake-up call, not the end. Remember, you're a team. Christine lowered her head. I never meant for this to happen, Dad, she whispered, her voice heavy with guilt. I know, but Christine, Josie didn't do this alone, Ray said, his tone calm but firm. The room went quiet again, the weight of Ray's words hanging in the air. After a few moments, Christine spoke once more, her voice small, almost like a child's. Dad, can I talk to you alone? If everyone else doesn't mind, I don't either, Ray replied. Christine glanced around the room, and seeing no objections, she took the phone and retreated to a spare room, closing the door behind her. Dad, I'm scared, Christine confessed. Eric is talking about divorce, or at least counseling. What should I do? You can fix this, Christine. Here's what you'll do. Now that your daughters are mostly grown, put the time you used to spend raising them back into your marriage. This isn't free time, like your mother thought. You're his partner, not his boss, Ray advised. Christine's voice trembled. He's really angry, Dad. Ever since he started seeing this as me giving myself permission to cheat, he's been furious. He's constantly snapping at me, and I know he wonders if I've already done something. Ray's voice remained steady. Did you? No, Daddy, no, Christine answered quickly. But I don't know how to convince him. All you can do is make sure there's no reason for suspicion moving forward. If you stay honest, questions about the past will eventually fade, Ray assured her. Christine hesitated. Dad, I'm really sorry. Isn't there any way to fix things between you and Mom? It's too late for us, honey, but it's not too late for you, Ray said softly. Christine's voice cracked as she whispered, Daddy, I love you. I love you too, Ray replied.
My wife and I both worked at the same company, though we were in different departments. We usually kept work and home life separate, but occasionally she would mention something interesting about her day. One evening, while we were having dinner, she brought up a new hire in her department. There's this new girl at work, she said with a tone of excitement. She's so interesting. You should meet her sometime. She's got this vibe, you know? Really cool. I told her to talk to the girl during her next break if she was that curious. It was practical advice. If you're intrigued, just go and find out more. A couple of days passed, and my wife mentioned that she had gotten to know this new colleague pretty well. She's got some unique interests, she said, glancing at me with a sly smile. I raised an eyebrow, curious but not overly concerned. I asked her what kind of interests, expecting something about hobbies or lifestyle quirks. Instead, she surprised me with, well, let's just say she's got some specific tastes in the bedroom. Her comment caught me off guard. I set down my fork and looked at her. How do you go from small talk to discussing that in just 2 days? I asked, keeping my tone even. I wasn't angry, just genuinely curious about how such a conversation unfolded so quickly. My wife shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. We're women, she said. These things come up. It's not like it's a big deal. I nodded, though the explanation didn't entirely satisfy me. I wasn't one to press the issue unnecessarily, so I let it go. It seemed like one of those conversations that didn't require much digging. But it did make me wonder how deep this new friendship had already gotten. My wife wasn't usually one to dive into personal topics with people she'd just met. Later that evening, as we were relaxing on the couch, she brought up the new colleague again. You know, she said, she's actually really smart. She's got a sharp sense of humor, too. I think you'd like her. I simply nodded, not really interested in meeting any of her co-workers unless it was absolutely necessary. Work friendships were her domain, not mine. Over the next couple of days, she continued mentioning this new hire in passing. Each time, there was some new detail. Apparently, the woman was well-traveled, had a unique sense of style, and was full of interesting stories. I'd started tuning most of it out by then, focusing on my own work and routines. My wife had a way of getting fascinated by people, and it usually passed quickly. Then, out of the blue, she said something that caught my attention. You know, she began one evening, her tone lighter than usual, I've been thinking of doing something special. In a couple of days, I've got a little surprise planned for you. Her eyes sparkled with intrigue, and she gave me a mischievous smile. I looked at her, trying to read her expression. What kind of surprise? I asked, my curiosity piqued despite myself. She shook her head, refusing to give me any more details. Just wait. You'll see. It was vague but deliberate, enough to make me wonder what she had in store. She seemed genuinely excited, and I decided to leave it at that, figuring I'd find out soon enough. The way she talked about it left me intrigued but also cautious. Surprises weren't really my thing, but I wasn't one to ruin her fun. Whatever it was, I'd deal with it when the time came. For now, I let her have her moment of excitement and focused on finishing my dinner. The next day, my wife told me we were hosting a barbecue. She seemed excited about it, mentioning that some people from her work were coming over to discuss a project idea. She dropped the names of her friend and her friend's boyfriend, as well as the new colleague and her boyfriend. It sounded casual enough, so I didn't ask too many questions. I took it upon myself to handle the preparations, heading out to buy the meat and other essentials. A barbecue, in my opinion, was straightforward, good food, good company, no unnecessary fuss. When everyone arrived, the atmosphere was easygoing. My wife's friend and her boyfriend were the first to show up, carrying a bottle of wine and a few side dishes. Not long after, the new colleague and her boyfriend walked in. My first impression of the pair was neutral. They seemed polite, but there was something about the way they carried themselves that felt overly casual for a first meeting. Still, I wasn't one to judge too quickly. We set up in the backyard, firing up the grill and laying out the food. Everyone was chatting, sipping drinks, and getting comfortable. I mostly kept to my role as the host, grilling and keeping an eye on the setup. My wife moved between the groups, laughing and talking animatedly. She was in her element, enjoying the company and the conversation. At one point, my wife called everyone together. She had an idea she wanted to propose, something she described as a great way for all of us to bond. We should go on a hiking trip, she said, her enthusiasm infectious. It's the perfect way to get to know each other better, and it'll be fun. I nodded in agreement. I loved hiking, and the thought of getting out into nature was always appealing to me. The others seemed to like the idea as well, and the conversation quickly shifted to planning. As the group talked about potential dates and logistics, I couldn't help but notice the new colleague. She had a way of steering the conversation, often bringing up topics that felt a little too personal for the setting. Her boyfriend was much the same, chiming in with remarks that bordered on inappropriate but stayed just shy of crossing the line. They clearly complemented each other in that regard. I kept my observations to myself, focusing instead on the barbecue. The evening wore on, and everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves. The wine flowed a little more freely, and the conversations became more animated. My wife's friend and her boyfriend were discussing hiking trails, while the new colleague shared stories about her past adventures, though they inevitably veered into discussions of her more unusual hobbies. It wasn't overtly shocking, but it was enough to make me raise an eyebrow. Eventually, the group settled on a date for the hiking trip. The excitement was palpable, and everyone seemed genuinely invested in making it happen. My wife was beaming, clearly pleased with how the evening had gone. I stayed in the background, content to let her take the lead. It was her idea, after all, and she had a way of organizing things that usually worked out. As the night wrapped up, people began to say their goodbyes. The new colleague and her boyfriend were the first to leave, followed by my wife's friend and her partner. The house felt quiet again once they were gone. My wife and I cleaned up together, talking about the trip and the plans we'd made. She seemed happy, and I was glad the evening had gone smoothly. With the date set, we had something to look forward to, and for now, that was enough. The day of the hike finally arrived. Everyone showed up on time, their energy high and spirits eager. We had rented all the necessary gear in advance, ensuring no one lacked anything essential for the trip. I took it upon myself to double-check everything. I wasn't about to let poor preparation ruin the outing. My wife seemed especially enthusiastic, buzzing around the group and keeping the momentum going. Once we were all set, we headed into the woods, the excitement palpable. The trail was scenic, with towering trees providing shade and a gentle breeze keeping us cool. We moved at a steady pace, occasionally stopping to take pictures or point out something interesting. The group dynamic was relaxed, with laughter and casual conversation filling the air. My wife's friend and her boyfriend were particularly animated, swapping stories about their previous hiking trips. The new colleague and her boyfriend lagged slightly behind, engaged in their own private conversation. I kept to the front, setting the pace and enjoying the tranquility of the forest. After a few hours, we found a clearing and decided it was a good spot to set up camp. Everyone pitched in to lay out the blankets and unpack the food. The spread was modest but satisfying, with sandwiches, fruits, and snacks providing enough energy for the day. We ate together, the camaraderie growing stronger as we shared stories and jokes. It felt good to unwind and connect with the group, though I kept my focus on practical matters, ensuring everything was running smoothly. As evening fell, we gathered around a small fire. The mood shifted slightly, becoming more reflective as the conversation turned to deeper topics. It was then that the new colleague's boyfriend spoke up. "Do you ever feel like life gets too routine?" he asked, his tone contemplative. Everyone nodded, intrigued by the direction the discussion was taking. He continued, "Sometimes you need to break out of that. Try something different. Something that shakes things up." He and his girlfriend went on to share their experience with swinger parties, speaking candidly about how it had brought a new dimension to their relationship. My wife's friend and her boyfriend seemed genuinely curious, asking questions and engaging in the discussion. I, on the other hand, was less than impressed. While I kept my expression neutral, I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. This wasn't the kind of topic I expected around a campfire, especially with people I barely knew. What bothered me more was the way my wife reacted. She was completely engrossed, her eyes alight with curiosity as she asked questions and listened intently. It wasn't like her to be so captivated by something so out of character. I observed her quietly, noting her enthusiasm but choosing not to comment. It wasn't the time or place for a confrontation, and I wasn't about to cause a scene in front of everyone. The conversation eventually shifted to other topics, and the atmosphere lightened again. We talked about future plans, shared more stories, and enjoyed the warmth of the fire. By the time we called it a night, the earlier tension had dissipated, replaced by the usual camaraderie. Everyone seemed satisfied with how the day had gone, and we retired to our tents, ready to rest before the journey back. The next morning, we packed up and prepared to leave. The group was in good spirits despite the previous night's odd turn of conversation. We retraced our steps back to the cars, the hike down uneventful but pleasant. By the time we reached the parking lot, everyone was ready to head home. The trip had been a success on the surface, but I couldn't shake the lingering unease from the night before. Still, I kept my thoughts to myself as we said our goodbyes and went our separate ways. After we had both caught up on some much-needed sleep, I decided to address the conversation from the night before. Over breakfast, I brought it up. "Listen," I said, keeping my tone firm but calm, "that whole talk about swinger parties from last night? I'm not a fan. Frankly, I find it pretty disgusting." I watched her reaction closely, expecting her to agree or at least shrug it off. Instead, she raised an eyebrow, a faint smirk playing on her lips. "Really?" she asked. "You're telling me you wouldn't even be a little curious? Never wondered what it might be like?" Her tone was light, almost teasing, but the question landed like a punch. I put down my coffee and stared at her, dumbfounded. "Are you serious?" I asked. "How could I even consider something like that? It's cheating, plain and simple. What are you trying to say by even asking me that?" My voice was steady, but the edge of disbelief was clear. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that she would even entertain the idea. She held up her hands in mock surrender, still smiling faintly. "Relax," she said. "I'm not saying I want to do it. I was just curious about your reaction. You know how people always say forbidden fruit is the sweetest. Sometimes, it's just interesting to think about, that's all." Her explanation didn't sit right with me, but I decided to let it slide for the moment. There was no point in escalating the conversation further when it was already uncomfortable enough. Then she dropped another bombshell. "By the way," she said, as casually as if she were mentioning the weather, "my friend texted me earlier. You won't believe this, but they actually tried it. Right after the hike." I blinked at her, not sure I'd heard correctly. "Wait," I said, "you're saying they went to one of those parties? Just like that?" She nodded, clearly amused by my reaction. "And guess what?" she continued. "She loved it. She said it was an amazing experience and that they'd definitely do it again." I didn't know how to respond to that. The idea of it alone made me uncomfortable, and now it was something my wife's close friend was openly endorsing. I focused on finishing my meal, trying to keep my thoughts from spiraling. My wife seemed entirely unbothered, scrolling through her phone as if the conversation hadn't just taken a bizarre turn. "Anyway," she said after a moment, "she invited me for coffee in a couple of days. She wants to tell me all about it, and, we'll catch up on other gossip too." She said it so nonchalantly, like it was just another casual meetup. I gave her a nod, masking my unease. For now, I'd let her have her coffee date. But the direction these conversations were heading didn't sit well with me, and I knew I'd need to keep an eye on things moving forward. The day my wife went out for coffee with her friend, I got a call from one of my work buddies. They were planning to meet up for a few beers after work and invited me to join. It sounded like a good opportunity to unwind, so I agreed. After finishing my tasks for the day, I headed to our usual spot, a cozy bar not far from the office. By the time I arrived, a couple of the guys were already there, laughing and swapping stories. We grabbed a table in the corner, and the conversation flowed naturally. At first, it was the usual banter about work, deadlines, client headaches, and office gossip. Then someone brought up the new hires, which inevitably led to talk about my wife's new colleague. "You've heard about her, right?" one of the guys asked, leaning in conspiratorially. "Apparently, she's already making waves." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of waves?" I asked, genuinely curious. The guy smirked. Well, there's talk that she's been flirting with a few people in the office. And get this, she's apparently inviting them to some kind of swinger party. There was a collective chuckle around the table, though the tone was more incredulous than amused. That's ridiculous, I said, shaking my head. She and her boyfriend came on a hike with us not too long ago, and they were trying to sell that same nonsense to my wife's friends. It's like they're recruiting people for their lifestyle. The group's laughter died down as the conversation took a more serious tone. Sounds like trouble, one of the guys said. If she's really pulling that stuff at work, it could cause problems for the whole office. Honestly, if it were me, I'd keep my wife away from her. You don't want her getting caught up in that mess. The others nodded in agreement, and I took a moment to consider his words. It's already bad enough that she's got her friend interested, I said. This whole thing just feels wrong. People are treating it like a joke, but it's not funny when it starts affecting relationships. They all agreed, and the conversation shifted to other topics. Still, the unease lingered in the back of my mind. The idea of that colleague spreading her influence around the office didn't sit well with me. As the evening went on, the group slowly began to disband. One by one, the guys finished their drinks and headed home. I stayed a little longer, nursing my beer and mulling over the conversation. By the time I decided to leave, the bar was nearly empty. I said my goodbyes and stepped out into the cool night air. The drive home was quiet, giving me time to think. I couldn't shake the feeling that things were escalating in a direction I didn't like. My wife's growing interest in her colleague's lifestyle, coupled with the rumors I'd just heard, made me uneasy. But I reminded myself that I couldn't jump to conclusions. For now, all I could do was stay vigilant and keep an eye on how things developed. When I got home that evening, my wife was waiting for me in the living room. She looked excited about something, a sparkle in her eye that made me brace myself for whatever she was about to say. Guess what? She began, not waiting for a response. My colleague is organizing a party, and we're invited. It's going to be great. My friend and her boyfriend are coming too. Her enthusiasm was clear, but it didn't take me long to piece together what kind of party she was talking about. You're not going, I said firmly, cutting through her excitement. Her smile faltered, and she stared at me, taken aback by my bluntness. I don't want you hanging around that colleague anymore, I continued. She's trouble, and you've seen what's happened to our friends because of her influence. I won't have her dragging us into the same mess. She blinked, her expression shifting from surprise to irritation. Excuse me, she said, her tone rising. Are you seriously telling me who I can and can't be friends with? Do you even hear yourself? You're acting like a control freak. Her words came fast, each one laced with frustration. She was clearly not expecting me to put my foot down. I didn't back down. Call it what you want, I said, keeping my voice steady. But I know what's right, and this isn't it. I'm not going to pretend that what she's doing is normal or acceptable. You've heard the rumors about her inviting half the office to these parties. Think about the kind of reputation she's building for herself. Do you really want to be associated with that? My wife's frustration boiled over. This isn't about her, she snapped. This is about you not trusting me. I can make my own decisions, and I don't need you telling me what I can or can't do. She stormed off, slamming the door to the bedroom behind her. I stood there for a moment, letting the tension settle. I wasn't about to back down from what I believed was the right decision, but her reaction made it clear this wasn't the end of the conversation. Later that night, my phone buzzed. It was one of my friends from work, the same guy who'd been at the bar earlier. Hey, he said, his voice casual. I heard about this party your wife's colleague is throwing. Why aren't you letting her go? And why aren't you going? His question was direct, but there was no malice in it, just curiosity. Because I don't support that kind of thing, I replied. It's against everything I believe in, and I'm not about to let my wife get involved in it either. It's not just a party, it's a whole lifestyle that I don't agree with. I won't compromise my principles for something like this. There was a pause on the other end before he spoke again. Fair enough, he said. I respect your perspective, man. You've always been straightforward about where you stand. Just thought I'd ask. His tone was genuine, and I appreciated that he didn't push further. Thanks, I said. I'm glad you get where I'm coming from. He wrapped up the call with a simple take care, leaving me to my thoughts. While I still felt the weight of the disagreement with my wife, it was reassuring to know that at least someone understood my position. The office had been buzzing with rumors all week. Whispers floated through the halls about who was planning to attend the upcoming party and who wasn't. The date and time had even leaked, giving everyone something to talk about during coffee breaks. While I didn't involve myself in the gossip, it was impossible not to overhear bits and pieces. My focus remained on my work, but the chatter served as a constant reminder of the influence that colleague was wielding. It seemed like half the office was caught up in her orbit, and it only reinforced my decision to keep my wife away from her. That evening, I returned home, tired but glad to leave the noise of the office behind. As I was settling in, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her tone was warm but carried a sense of urgency. Your father needs a hand with the garage, she said. Everything is nearly done, but there are a few final touches we can't manage on our own. Can you come by tomorrow? I didn't hesitate to agree. Family came first, and if they needed my help, I'd be there. After hanging up, I turned to my wife to let her know about the trip. I need to head to my parents' place tomorrow, I said. Just for the day. My dad needs help finishing up the garage. It won't take long. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, and looked up with a casual nod. Okay, she said. I was thinking of meeting up with my friend anyway. Might be a good chance to catch up. Her response was nonchalant, but I didn't let the conversation end there. Listen, I said, my tone firm but not harsh. I need you to promise me something. Don't do anything questionable while I'm gone. You know how important this is to me. I'm trying to keep us on solid ground here. I watched her closely, wanting to ensure she understood the seriousness of what I was saying. She raised an eyebrow, clearly not thrilled with my request. Seriously, she said. You think I'm just going to go wild the moment you're out the door? Give me some credit. Her tone was slightly defensive, but I wasn't about to back down. It's not about trust, I said. It's about keeping our priorities straight. I care about us, and I don't want anything jeopardizing that. She sighed, clearly annoyed but unwilling to argue further. Fine, she said. I promise I won't do anything crazy. You've got my word. While her words were reassuring, her tone left me with lingering doubts. Still, I chose to take her at face value. There was no point in pushing the matter further, especially when I had other things to focus on. I nodded, letting the conversation wind down. Good, I said. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I'm only gone for a day, and when I get back, we'll move forward together. She gave a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. It was enough for now, or at least that's what I told myself. As she turned her attention back to her phone, she made a parting comment. Okay, she said, waving a hand dismissively. But let's not start another lecture about the same thing. I get it. You don't need to hit replay on this topic every time. Her words stung a bit, but I let it slide. The important thing was that she'd given me her word. She looked up once more, her tone softening slightly. All right, fine. Just don't worry so much, okay? I'll meet my friend, have some coffee, and that'll be it. No drama. But seriously, no need for the same old speech again. With that, she returned to her scrolling, and I left her to it, hoping she'd stick to her promise. As I sat at a red light on my way to my parents' house, my phone buzzed with notifications. It was the group chat with the guys from work. I glanced at it briefly, noting the usual banter and jokes. Then a new message popped up. Someone asked, "So, who's actually going to that party tonight? It's supposed to be happening soon." A few responses trickled in, most of them dismissive or joking. One guy replied, "I'm single, so why not? I'll go just to see what all the fuss is about." The casual tone made it seem like no big deal, but it still irked me. I locked my phone and focused on the road, trying not to let it get under my skin. When I arrived at my parents' house, my father was already outside, waiting with a toolbox in hand. The garage was nearly finished, but it needed a few adjustments before it could be called complete. We got to work quickly, measuring, hammering, and installing the last few fixtures. It felt good to do something productive, something tangible. My dad and I had always worked well together on projects like this, and it gave me a sense of accomplishment. As we worked, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video message from one of the guys in the chat. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. The clip was shaky, clearly recorded on a phone, showing what appeared to be the party in question. The room was dimly lit, filled with people milling about, laughing, and drinking. Then the camera panned, and my heart skipped a beat. Among the crowd, I caught a glimpse of a dress that looked unsettlingly familiar. It was the same color and style as one my wife owned, one she'd worn recently. I stared at the screen, my stomach tightening. Could it really be her? The angle wasn't clear enough to be certain, but the possibility gnawed at me. I called the guy who had sent the video, keeping my voice steady. "Hey, do me a favor," I said. "Can you look around and see if my wife's there? She might be wearing a dress like the one you just showed." There was a pause before he responded, his tone casual. "Sure, give me a minute." I continued working with my dad, though my mind was far from the task at hand. Minutes felt like hours until the guy finally texted back. "Didn't see her," he wrote. "Probably not there." "Relax, man." His response was meant to reassure me, but it didn't. The uncertainty lingered, and I knew I couldn't shake it until I got home and saw for myself. I wrapped up the work as quickly as I could, pushing through the final tasks with a renewed sense of urgency. My dad noticed my distraction, but didn't press me on it. Once we finished, I packed up my tools and told my parents I needed to head back. My mom stopped me on the way out, her expression concerned. "Is everything okay?" she asked. I hesitated, then told them about the video and my suspicion. My father frowned, crossing his arms. "You need to be careful," he said. "Don't let your emotions cloud your judgment, but don't ignore your instincts either. If something doesn't feel right, act on it." My mom nodded in agreement. "Just make sure you protect yourself," she added. "Whatever's going on, you need to be prepared." Their advice was practical, but it didn't ease the knot in my chest. I thanked them, promising to keep them updated, and got in my car. As I drove back, my thoughts raced. The words of my parents echoed in my mind, "Protect yourself first." It was a sobering reminder of what might lie ahead. I pulled into the driveway, my headlights cutting through the darkness. As I turned off the engine, I noticed a figure at the front door. It was my wife, fumbling with her keys, clearly struggling to keep her balance. She was wearing the same dress I'd glimpsed in the video earlier, and her movements were unsteady. My heart pounded as I got out of the car, closing the door quietly and walking briskly toward her. By the time I reached her, she had managed to open the door and was stumbling inside. Her condition was worse than I'd expected. Her dress was soaked in some kind of white liquid, and the smell of alcohol hit me like a wall. All this liquid was dripping from her, even from her head. She barely acknowledged my presence as she staggered toward the living room, collapsing onto the couch without a word. Within moments, she was asleep, her breathing heavy and uneven. I stood there, trying to process what I was seeing. The state she was in was alarming, but I couldn't ignore the anger bubbling beneath my confusion. I walked over to her, noticing the stains on her clothes and the disheveled state of her hair. It was clear she'd been at the party, and whatever had happened there had gone far beyond what I'd anticipated. Her phone was lying on the coffee table, its screen lighting up with notifications. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up. The lock screen showed messages from group chats, but it was the videos that caught my eye. A few were recent, taken within the last couple of hours. My pulse quickened as I opened one, and what I saw confirmed my worst fears. The video showed her at the party, surrounded by familiar faces from her office. It didn't take long to see what had transpired. The footage was explicit, leaving no room for misinterpretation. She had been with 6 different men, all of whom I recognized as her co-workers. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, and I had to steady myself against the table to keep from losing my composure. I forced myself to keep watching, not out of morbid curiosity, but because I needed to understand the full extent of what had happened. Each clip painted the same picture, a betrayal that was as blatant as it was devastating. My hands clenched the phone tightly as I navigated through the files, my anger growing with each passing second. Once I'd seen enough, I transferred the videos to my own phone. The process was mechanical, my mind numb to everything but the task at hand. I knew I needed to have evidence, not just for myself but for whatever steps I might need to take next. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on me, but I refused to let it overwhelm me. With the files safely stored, I placed her phone back on the table. She was still fast asleep, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. For a moment, I simply stood there, watching her in silence. The woman I thought I knew had crossed a line I couldn't ignore, and there was no going back from what I discovered tonight. For now, I left her where she was, allowing her to sleep off the night while I prepared for what would come next. The words of my parents echoed in my mind, "Protect yourself first." As I sat alone in the kitchen, the reality of the situation began to sink in fully. There was no time for hesitation or second-guessing. I had to act swiftly and decisively. My first move was to secure our finances. I logged into the online banking accounts, transferring all the money from both my accounts and hers into one that was solely under my parents' names. It wasn't theft, it was safeguarding what belonged to us, or, more accurately, what was left of my trust. Once that was done, I moved to the physical cash we kept at home. There was a small stash in a safe, something we had agreed upon for emergencies. I took every last bill, placing it into a sturdy envelope, and headed out to the garage. Beneath an old stack of tires, I created a hiding spot that I knew she wouldn't think to look for. It wasn't the most secure location, but it was out of sight and would serve its purpose for the time being. I paused for a moment, looking around the garage. It had always been a space of order and utility, a place where I came to work on projects or clear my head. Now, it felt like a makeshift fortress, a place to shield myself from the fallout of what was to come. I returned to the house, steeling myself for the next step in my plan. Sitting at my desk, I created a new, anonymous email account. The process was straightforward, but each keystroke carried the weight of the decision I was making. I needed to expose what had happened, not out of revenge, but to ensure there were consequences for her actions. It wasn't just about me anymore, her behavior could potentially harm others, including the company where we both worked. With the account set up, I began drafting an email. The recipient, the CEO of our company. The subject line was concise, but impactful, urgent, employee conduct risk. I attached the videos I had transferred earlier, ensuring that each file was clearly labeled. In the body of the email, I outlined the situation. I kept the tone professional, emphasizing the potential reputational damage her actions could cause to the organization. The attached videos document behavior that goes against the values and professional standards of our workplace, I wrote. As someone in a position of leadership, I believe it's in the company's best interest to address this matter promptly. Failure to do so may result in broader repercussions that could tarnish the company's reputation. I read through the email multiple times, making sure it struck the right balance of urgency and professionalism. Once satisfied, I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the send button. This wasn't an action I could take back, but it was necessary. The damage had already been done, and protecting myself and my integrity meant following through. I pressed send, watching as the email disappeared from my screen. There was no turning back now. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling deeply. The hardest part was over, or so I thought. My phone buzzed with notifications from the group chat, but I ignored them. My focus remained on the actions I'd taken. Exposing the truth was a step toward reclaiming control, and I was determined to see it through to the end. Morning arrived with the sharp sound of my wife's phone ringing. She stirred, groaning as she reached for it, still clearly groggy from the night before. As she answered, I could hear the voice on the other end of the line. Her colleague was yelling, so loudly that I could make out some of the words even from across the room. Phrases like disgrace, videos, and fired stood out, cutting through the muffled noise. My wife sat up abruptly, her face a mixture of confusion and panic as she tried to process what she was hearing. Her colleague's voice continued, detailing how the videos had been sent to the company's leadership and circulated among other employees. The fallout had been immediate. The director had taken swift action, firing those involved, and the office was now rife with rumors and speculation. My wife's expression darkened as the reality of the situation began to sink in. She barely managed to stammer a few words before the call ended, leaving her staring blankly at the phone. I cleared my throat, breaking the silence. She turned to look at me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Her eyes darted over me, then down at herself. She was still wearing the stained dress from the night before, her hair disheveled, and the strong scent of alcohol lingered in the air. I could see the gears turning in her head as she pieced together the events leading to this moment. "Doesn't it bother you?" I asked, my tone calm but pointed. "Waking up like this, knowing what you've done?" My words hit their mark, and her face twisted into a mix of shame and anger. She didn't bother to deny anything, instead launching into a tirade. "You did this," she yelled, her voice rising. "You're the one who set this all up. You're the reason this is happening. Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" I stood my ground, meeting her glare with steady resolve. "What I've done?" I asked. "You're blaming me for the consequences of your actions? You're the one who crossed the line, and now you're dealing with the fallout. Don't try to make this about me." My voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. Her attempt to shift the blame only solidified my decision. She tried to argue, her words a chaotic mix of anger and desperation, but I'd heard enough. "That's enough," I said, cutting her off. "You need to leave. You've made your choices, and now I'm making mine. This isn't your home anymore." The weight of my words hung in the air, and for the first time, she seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. The night before, I had already taken steps to prepare for this moment. Her belongings were packed and waiting by the door. It wasn't much, just the essentials she'd need to get by for the time being. I had no interest in a drawn-out confrontation or lingering complications. My priority was making a clean break and moving forward. She stared at the packed bags, her expression shifting between disbelief and fury. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice trembling. But I was. I pointed to the door, making it clear that there was no room for negotiation. "Take your things and go," I said. "You've made your bed. Now you have to lie in it." Reluctantly, she gathered her things, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. I didn't say another word as she walked out, closing the door behind her. The silence that followed was heavy but also liberating. For the first time in days, I felt like I was in control of my own life again. She was gone, and with her departure came the promise of a new beginning. The fallout from the videos was swift and brutal. My wife's presence in them had been unmistakable, and the company's leadership acted decisively. Despite the chaos that had already unfolded, the professional consequences hit her the hardest. Early in the day, she was called into a meeting with HR and senior management. From what I later heard, the tone of the meeting was serious but firm. They explained that her actions had created an untenable situation for the company, one that posed significant reputational risks. There was no room for negotiation. She was terminated on the spot, effective immediately. Her attempts to explain or justify her behavior fell on deaf ears. The leadership's decision was final, and they made it clear that there was no path to redemption in their eyes. The weight of her actions had caught up with her, and there was no escaping the consequences. By the time she left the office, word had already spread among her colleagues. The whispers and stares followed her out the door. According to a mutual acquaintance, she broke down in tears as she packed up her desk. The humiliation was palpable, and she reportedly begged for understanding from those around her. But the damage was done. The videos had circulated widely, and even those who might have been sympathetic kept their distance, unwilling to be associated with her scandal. She walked out of the building with her box of belongings, her career in tatters. At home, the silence was deafening. I knew she had no intention of coming back, and I had no intention of letting her. The house felt emptier without her presence, but that emptiness was a relief rather than a burden. I spent the day reflecting on the events that had led us here, my resolve strengthening with each passing hour. There was no going back to the way things were, and I didn't want to. My next step was to make everything official. That evening, I picked up the phone and called an attorney. The conversation was brief but direct. I explained the situation, detailing the betrayal and the evidence I had gathered. The lawyer listened attentively, offering practical advice on how to proceed. He assured me that the case was straightforward and that the divorce would likely be resolved quickly given the circumstances. I felt a sense of clarity as we discussed the legal steps ahead. While waiting for the paperwork to be drafted, I reflected on what this meant for my future. The marriage I had once valued was irreparably broken, but I didn't feel regret for taking the steps I had. My focus now was on rebuilding my life and ensuring that I moved forward without the weight of her actions dragging me down. The process was methodical, each step a reminder that I was taking control of my own narrative. The attorney worked efficiently, and within days, the divorce proceedings were underway. I made sure every detail was handled with care, ensuring that there would be no loose ends or complications. The evidence I provided left no room for dispute, and the process moved forward without delay. Each milestone in the legal proceedings brought a sense of closure, a reassurance that I was making the right choices. In the end, the divorce was finalized without much contention. The separation was clean, the assets divided as agreed, and I was left with the freedom to start anew. It was a bittersweet conclusion, but one that was necessary. As I signed the final documents, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The chapter was closed, and I was ready to move forward, leaving the past behind. Not long after the divorce was finalized, my quiet evening was interrupted by an unexpected knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I approached cautiously. Through the peephole, I saw my ex-wife standing with her colleague, the very one responsible for much of this chaos. Their expressions were a mix of anger and determination, and I immediately knew this wouldn't be a pleasant visit. I opened the door slightly, enough to hear them out, but not enough to let them in. My ex-wife wasted no time, launching into accusations. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" she demanded. Her colleague chimed in, backing her up with vague threats about retaliation and making my life difficult. Their words were sharp, but their desperation was evident. It was clear they were grasping at straws, trying to regain some semblance of control over a situation that had spiraled out of their hands. I stood there calmly, letting them rant without reacting. When they finally paused, expecting a response, I simply said, "We're done here." Without another word, I closed the door in their faces. The lock clicked into place, a satisfying reminder that I had changed all the locks weeks ago. I had no reason to worry about them trying to force their way back into my life. Whatever they thought they could accomplish by showing up unannounced, it had failed. From the other side of the door, I could hear their muffled voices as they continued to argue among themselves. I didn't bother trying to make out the words. Instead, I walked back to the living room and sat down, letting the encounter roll off me like water off a duck's back. I had already taken all the necessary precautions to ensure they couldn't interfere with my life anymore. The locks, the finances, the clean break, everything was in place. They could huff and puff all they wanted, but they no longer had any power over me. The incident, while mildly annoying, only reinforced my decision to move forward. It was a reminder of the toxicity I had left behind and the importance of maintaining boundaries. I didn't let it linger in my mind for long. Instead, I turned my attention to more productive things, like planning for the future and focusing on the people who truly mattered in my life. Later that evening, I received a call from an old friend. It was one of the guys who had been caught up in the mess with my ex-wife and her colleague. I hadn't spoken to him much since everything went down, so his call came as a surprise. "Hey," he started, his tone cautious but sincere. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I wanted to say thank you." I was taken aback. "Thank me? For what?" I asked. He sighed, as if gathering his thoughts. "For waking me up," he said. "When you exposed everything, it forced me to take a hard look at my own life and the choices I was making. My partner and I had a serious conversation, and we realized how far off track we'd gotten. It wasn't easy, but we've started to rebuild, and it's all because you had the guts to do what needed to be done." His words caught me off guard, but they also filled me with a sense of validation. I hadn't set out to change anyone else's life, but knowing that my actions had a positive ripple effect was reassuring. He continued, "Look, I owe you a drink. Let's meet up sometime soon. I want to catch up and thank you properly." I agreed, feeling a small weight lift off my shoulders. The chaos of the past few weeks had been overwhelming, but moments like this reminded me that doing the right thing often comes with unexpected rewards. As I hung up the phone, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. It was time to move on, one step at a time, surrounded by people who valued honesty and integrity.
I, 19 female, just recently moved out of my parents' house a week ago with my 3-year-old dog. For background, I found my girl when she was a puppy, right before she got washed down a storm drain on a super rainy day. She's a border collie mix. So anyway, with the money that I was saving for a car, I paid for her vet visits, gave her medications, and got her back to health. Then I trained her. Thank goodness for online learning at the time, all the while being told by my parents that if she messed up even once, she was out of the house. Fast forward to the past year, and my parents have now started to pass her off to my little brother because he wants his own dog now, to the point where they tried to change her name. While he wants a dog, my brother's not mature enough for one. A week ago, he got upset because she went to the door and pressed the out button. I taught her how to press a button when she needed to walk, and he started to yell at her for it. I yelled at him and told him to back the heck off. Then my parents yelled at me, saying he was allowed to discipline his dog. I lost it, took her out, and then back into my room when we got home. Without telling them, I started looking at the cheapest places to get into, and now live in my own apartment. It's not ideal, but it's cheap, and a 30-minute bus ride to college and work. I made the move while they were at work, and now they're blowing up my phone, wanting to know where I live, so my brother can get his dog, calling me an idiot for separating boy and dog. Am I the idiot? So you moved out without telling your family, and all they care about is to give your brat brother the dog back? Not the idiot. Obviously, you seem very reasonable, mature, and responsible. Good luck with the dog in your new life. Your family is awful. Why would you even ask that? Do you have receipts for all the vet bills you paid? And a copy of the papers at the vet saying how you found the dog? This will be your proof of ownership. Are dogs licensed where you live? If so, and she was not licensed, do it yesterday. Tell your parents it's your dog, and you will not allow her to be mistreated and not to contact you again until they come to their senses. They sound like raving idiots. If they keep harassing you, block them. Make sure your landlord or whoever knows to keep everyone from entering your apartment. You should cover all bases. Yep, this is your dog. You trained her and spent the money on her. Don't respond to your parents or your brother about your dog. It doesn't pertain to them at all. Also, if you don't have her microchipped, definitely do that and put your name and details. If brother wants a dog so badly, there are thousands in shelters that need homes. Though, to be honest, I'm not sure I wish your family on any of them. Also, your brother's a brat, and your parents are enabling said brat. Sorry you have parents like this. How dare they? Go no contact with all of them. He's their golden child, and they want to give him everything. Hun, I'm very proud of you. You're amazing, and I hope you and your dog have a great journey together, And do not tell them where you live. Your parents, I want to shake them. You have a brain, guts, and a heart. I'm so very proud of you. LP, congrats on getting away from your idiot family. Do not tell them where you live. Block them on all social media, etc. Things are going to be so much better now. Stand your ground and keep setting boundaries, and get therapy or counseling if you can. Just reading between the lines here, but they're clearly messed up people, and it takes time to heal from growing up in that sort of environment. My 36 female daughter Leah, 18, is a mom. My daughter got pregnant 5 years ago, and it was very shocking news, but we found out very early on and she got to end it. A few months later, she got pregnant again, and I couldn't handle the situation very well at the time. But having my sister, her aunt, talk to her about what she was planning to do, she decided to keep the baby, which I'll admit I wasn't very happy to hear, and I told her she'd have to be responsible about the consequences. Of course, as a mother, I couldn't have her work and distract her from school. I didn't want her to miss out on her childhood, so I had to work evening-night shifts to care for my granddaughter while Leah was in school. Recently, I realized that Leah's been taking advantage of my situation and making me cancel plans so I can babysit for her. I overheard her making plans 2 weeks ahead on the phone with someone saying, "My mom will do it. She has no life anyways," and laughing afterward. Being a single mom and working multiple jobs was hard enough, but since she gave birth to her daughter, I haven't gone out to parties. I've canceled many weekend gatherings so that my daughter can hang out with her friends. And if I did go, I'd always have my granddaughter with me. And for her to laugh about my situation like that angered me. That same day, I was asked by this guy I'd been seeing to accompany him. And I was hesitant, but I didn't want to miss the chance. He's a really nice guy. I haven't been on a date for almost 6 years, and it wouldn't hurt to give my daughter a taste of motherhood when she least expected it. I told my daughter that I got asked out for the same day, and she was happy at first, but then asked if I was going to take her daughter with me, and I said obviously not, and she'll have to cancel plans for a day. I didn't expect her reaction to be so extreme. She cried, screamed, and told me I was being selfish, and that I was letting her miss her date just because I thought some guy was interested in me. The argument didn't end very well. I stood my ground and went to that date, and she had to cancel plans, but she's still really mad about it and has been ignoring me. I love my daughter and wouldn't want her to miss anything, but I wanted her to learn a lesson and be responsible. My sister agreed with me, but my friend told me I should have done it on any other day. Does my approach make me an idiot? Not the idiot. Your daughter is an entitled, supersized idiot. You've created a monster who has zero respect for you. You should quit being the mother to her baby. I cannot refer to it as babysitting because I suspect that you've been more of a mother to this baby than she has. She chose to have this baby and she needs to raise it. If she doesn't, get ready to be a grandma again within 1 to 2 years max. Why should she try to prevent getting pregnant again when you're the one facing all the real lasting consequences of having the baby? Yeah, that drove me nuts. I hope from now on, OP prioritizes her own life and happiness more. Her daughter has a responsibility to learn how to be a mother to her child, not expect others to put their lives on hold to play babysitter all the time and then say they have no life. OP, your kid needs tough love. You need to stop canceling your plans and let her deal with her own child. What got me was, I, 36 female, have a daughter, Leah, 18, followed by, her pregnancy was very shocking news. So a mother who had her kid at 18 is very shocked her daughter got pregnant and had a child at 18? Honestly, I hate them both. She refers to the baby as it. She's flippantly talking about motherhood. You both just needed to be adults for once and screamed and cried about who deserved a date. How about this? Neither of you. You're horrible people and need to realize what's important. Everyone's the idiot here. You created this situation. You told your daughter she'd be responsible for her baby and immediately backtracked so your daughter wouldn't miss out on her childhood. All the while thinking you looked like a hero mom to your daughter, and she's been mocking you the whole time. As a result, your daughter's ungrateful and doesn't appreciate all you've done for her. I'm a man in my early 20s. This Wednesday, a new roommate moved in. She's a woman in her 20s, a single mom to an adorable young daughter. I've never met this woman before she moved in. She was brought in by our landlord. We had a 10-minute convo Wednesday before I went to work. I worked the night shift. Yesterday, she woke me up at 7 a.m. I got home at 3. She told me that she had to go to work, but that her daughter was in bed, and asked if I would keep an eye on her. I was so sleep deprived that she had already left by the time I was about to say, let alone minutes. Her kid is well taken care of. She's happy. They cuddled after her mom got home from work. She read her a story, played with her, and all. And that's why I'm hesitating. Oh, and she did apologize for dumping her on me. Apparently she wasn't even supposed to go to work, but there was an emergency. So am I the idiot if I called CPS on her? I have no problem with watching her kid. I actually love children. My issue is her mom not knowing me, not with me watching the kid. Everyone's the idiot here. Don't bring CPS into it over one incident. Set your boundary that I'm not comfortable watching your child again and see how it progresses. If you report her straight up, you might end up with a very tense living arrangement. You may be a stranger, but she did leave the kid in the house with an adult, which I suppose is better than her being alone. She's still an idiot, though. I personally wouldn't call CPS, but who leaves their child with a stranger? OP, you're not the idiot for considering it, but the mother is the idiot for dumping her child on someone without talking to them first and leaving her child with a stranger. I know a few parents who leave their kids with people they know without asking first, and I find that a problem. But this lady takes it to another level. It's crazy he's more concerned about the child than she is. She doesn't know anything about him. OP, you've barely seen this woman for 10 minutes. She and her kid are strangers. You don't even have her number, I'm guessing. You don't know the kid. The kid doesn't know you. You know nothing about school, allergies, or medical issues. If this happens again, contact the landlord. Tell him the woman and her kid are not a good fit in the house, and have them call the woman and call the cops. You should have a record of this, in case anything happens, to cover your butt. How long did she leave her with you? Do you have any way to contact her? Nope. Honestly, I couldn't even remember her name. That was how brief our convo was. She left her with me until around 6 p.m. This is insane. She was gone for 12 hours and you didn't know her name? Yeah, no, that's abandonment. She's gonna pull this crap with every roommate. Contact your landlord, make the report, and make it clear that you will not babysit again. If she does leave the kid again, call the cops. You'll need official evidence. That's completely unacceptable. What if you had to work? Why didn't you get her contact info immediately from the landlord for her name, number, and work to contact her directly? You need to make it absolutely clear that this cannot happen again. And if it does, you'll drop the child off at the police station on your way to wherever you had planned to go that day. You can tell her you had a pleasant time with the child and may be willing on occasion to sit with her for an hour with prior permission, but you're not childcare. Lay down the expectation now, because it'll get worse now that you got away with it once. I have 4 kids from prior relationships, and my wife has 1. She has full custody of her son, but I have 2 of my kids here full time and weekends for the other 2. My wife gave birth on Wednesday and came home from the hospital on Thursday, so the kids and I have been doing our best to keep the house as quiet and relaxing for her as possible. On Friday, she asked me not to pick my youngest kids up because she feels the house is already unbearable with 3 kids, and 5 is too much. I told her she knew that wasn't possible. That's not how custody arrangements work. Besides, how would that make my kids feel? She said she just gave birth, so her feelings are important. I said I'm not flaking on my kids, so we need to figure something else out. Friday, when it was time for me to pick up all the kids, my wife was napping. I didn't want to potentially wake her, so I told my oldest, he's 19, to hold the baby until I got back. When I returned with all the kids, my oldest and my wife were screaming at each other. The best I can tell is that she woke up and went looking for me, and my son told her where I went, and she called me a thoughtless idiot. My son called her a hateful witch, and then they started screaming at each other. I got the kids to all go outside for a bit while I talked to my wife. She said I was an unbelievably selfish idiot that couldn't even give her a break for one weekend. She said none of this would have happened if I hadn't insisted on picking up my younger kids. She said she wanted my oldest to leave, but I said that wasn't an option. She locked herself in our room. I get that childbirth is more challenging than I'll ever know, and she's exhausted, but I don't feel like what she asked for is something I can give. Was I an idiot for insisting on getting my kids? Not the idiot. I understand that she just gave birth and is exhausted and overwhelmed, but she doesn't get to pick and choose when you're a father to any of your children, and particularly not so you can prioritize her as an adult. You were correct that this is not how custody agreements work, but more importantly, that's not how parenting works. You are the idiot, as is your partner, for not making plans in advance of giving birth to provide an atmosphere as relaxing and most conducive to recovering during a traumatic and exhausting period. I think you should have had all your other kids at alternative arrangements, if possible, for a week or so while you settled in, got into a routine, and your wife recovered. The time to do that was about 3 to 6 months before giving birth. Let the other kids know why and plan for the time they'll all get to meet their new sibling. Frankly, I understand your partner to a point. I can't think of anything worse than having a house that crowded when I'm trying to recover and settle into the newborn routine. I'm astonished that this didn't occur to either of you prior to literally a day or so before the kids were due home. This will be a problem because you just had a 6th child with a woman who genuinely believes that it's okay to shove your other young children out the door for her personal comfort. OP will be expecting baby number 7 with this woman, number 4, soon enough. It's been 2 days, and they're already on different pages. This is a mess. OP's an idiot for not having this all figured out long before the baby was conceived, or at least during the 9 months leading up to the birth. Dude, stop having kids. My ex likes to tell me what I should and shouldn't do on my custody days, and I generally ignore her because there is a reason we divorced. She has a list of food she doesn't want our daughter to eat, and I ignore her list. I drop our daughter off at school Monday mornings, and her mother picks her up. She called me yesterday to say she was cleaning our daughter's lunchbox and found onion slivers and asked if any of the lunch I packed had onions. I said, yes, it did. She said that the onions were on her list. I said, I didn't care. She said onions make our daughter smell bad when she sweats, and kids will bully her. I said that our daughter showers at my house, and she might also try that at her house. She called me a spiteful idiot and told me no more onions. Our daughter likes onions, so I'm going to ignore her. A part of me does wonder if I was petty, though. It makes me angry when she tells me what to do, so maybe that's clouding my judgment. Am I the idiot? Edit. She's allergic to strawberries, but I don't feed her strawberries because she's allergic to them, not because they're on the list. Not the idiot. X would have known if the onions caused her to smell bad without finding the slivers. This woman's going to create massive food issues with your kid. Keep doing what you're doing, and just be better at hiding it from her. Your daughter deserves so much more than what her mother's giving her. How far does it go? She's too fat, so kids might bully her. So let's stop feeding her. She's got hair on her arms and people might bully her, so let's shave her. This woman's a monster. I was waiting for the allergy thing, and it was about smelling bad. She's a tween that likes onions. That's freaking awesome. Most kids are picky or plain eaters. While it is true that onions and garlic can make you smell, you need to eat quite a bit for it to take effect. Absolutely ridiculous. Ignore the mother. Heck, I might even take her to court to get her less time. She clearly has mental issues and needs a therapist.
My wife suggested an open marriage to hide her cheating, but I caught her and fought back. Doubt lingers when resorting to desperate measures. What actions could have steered clear of this situation? What steps might have prevented my current predicament? I was fairly certain my choices were limited. How do you make an adult realize their actions risk destroying everything they cherish? You can't coerce them into anything, you can only helplessly witness and handle the aftermath. That's where I found myself. My affectionate wife believed this would strengthen us, showcasing our love's depth and significance. I perceived it as a testament to her weak affection, highlighting her selfishness and indulgence. I'm just an average man leading an ordinary life. I'm not a resilient, tender, romantic hero. Like anyone else, I have flaws. I often focus too much on myself, work excessively, and occasionally express unwarranted anger. It's not intentional, it just happens. I'm only human. Such is life. Work and events often disrupt the flow. Amanda and I have been married for 19 years, enjoying closeness moments 2 or 3 times a week. It was always pleasurable, and we shared the enthusiasm for more when time allowed. Hobbies like football, good books, or TV shows, along with parental responsibilities, sometimes diverted our attention, yet we made time when necessary or when desire struck. Our marriage sailed smoothly, our finances improved, and our daughters, Olivia and Audra, aged 16 and 14, added joy to our lives. While I may have considered myself ordinary, they were something extraordinary. Life was flourishing until my wife entertained unconventional ideas. She labeled our bed life as plain vanilla and insisted on spicing things up. Despite my satisfaction, I agreed to play along. Initially, it involved experimenting with different positions, which I found enjoyable due to my athleticism and good shape. However, the novelty wore off after a few times. Then came the phase of role-playing, a concept I couldn't fathom its origin. Girlfriends, women's magazines, or some misguided TV show perhaps. It was fun for about 3 times, but eventually, it seemed impractical. Concentrating on a hot woman while trying to maintain a Leonardo DiCaprio character or remember she was Scarlett Johansson became challenging. I refused to continue, and suddenly she expressed displeasure. She inquired about the last time I went on a date. I replied that just the past Friday, I took her to that Italian place she wanted to try. We went to the movies, and her mom looked after the girls overnight. As she reminded me, clarifying that she didn't mean with her, she asked how long it had been since I went out with someone else. I questioned if she was accusing me of something. She quickly assured me that she wasn't, and wondered if I remembered the name of the last girl I went out with besides her. Confirming that I did, I mentioned her name. Was Donna. About 2 weeks after I met her, we had a big argument about that date. When she asked if I ever missed it, I laughed and said, "God, no." I recalled how awful the whole dating thing was. Not the date itself, which was pretty good. Working up the nerve to ask a girl out, worrying about being shot down, awkward first conversations, it was traumatic as hell, more like absolutely terrifying. She then asked what brought this on. I explained that I was just wondering if she ever felt like she'd like to go out on a date with someone else. She assured me that she had never felt like that. She recalled being extremely upset when I went out with Donna, reminding me that she told me she wanted us to be exclusive. I agreed, mentioning that I wanted the same. I added that if I felt differently, I wouldn't have asked her to marry me. Being married, I explained, means you don't go on dates with people other than your spouse. She dropped the subject, and I didn't hear any more about it for a month. It was a Friday night, and we had just finished making love, without any role-playing or gimmicks. It was just us, a man and his wife, enjoying each other. I came twice asking me, and she accepted my response, stating that she was just wondering. I had no clue where this was headed, but I wasn't comfortable with it. Doubting my ability to sleep, I got up and went to the den, engrossed in a video game. She appeared at the door, observing me for a moment, but I didn't meet her gaze. She returned to bed, and I joined her once she was asleep. Everything remained quiet for 2 months, until Angela's promotion party at the White Rhino with a great band. We all sat in a big circular booth, and Amanda was talking to Sebra. Corwin. Amanda mentioned that Sebra wanted to dance and asked if I could be a gentleman and dance with her. Recalling a conversation from 2 months ago, I found myself in an awkward position. While valuing Sebra's friendship and not wanting to hurt her feelings, I wasn't keen on dancing with her. The prospect of her lush body against mine raised concerns, but I wasn't sure how to gracefully decline. Although I enjoyed dancing, I wasn't confident in my abilities, especially compared to Sebra, who moved gracefully like a big cat. Feeling there was no good way out, I stood up and mentioned that I thought they were playing our song. Sebra joined me, her brown thighs visible below the short blue dress. As the song ended, the band started a slow number, and I wondered why now. Sebra fit against me seamlessly, and I could feel her bust against my chest, with her black curls nearly covering my face. She smelled nice, and when she looked up at me, her big brown eyes were like liquid pools, and her teeth flashed white against her dusky complexion. She wasn't a dark black girl, more like a coffee with cream color. After the dance, Sebra expressed gratitude, mentioning that Amanda said I wouldn't mind dancing with her. I complimented her dancing skills but admitted that I did mind, explaining that while I liked her a lot and considered her the sweetest girl I knew, dancing with her was not a good idea for me. She giggled and assured me that I was safe with her, expressing love and acknowledging that if I weren't married, she'd be all over me. However, she emphasized the importance of friendship and suggested we just enjoy that one dance. I squeezed her a little, and we finished the song. When we got back to the booth, Amanda wasn't there. I looked around and spotted her black and white dress. She was on the floor with some young Nordic-looking guy, laughing up into his face, and his hands were lower than they should have been. She noticed me looking for her, smiled, and shot me a wave. I was pissed, very pissed, in fact. She had set me up with Sibra so she could dance with that idiot. I threw a couple of 20s on the table and started walking toward the exit. Sibra watched me halfway to the door, then came running after me. I stopped, and she, a bit out of breath, asked where I was going. I informed her that we were being played. Amanda had been talking about dating other people and asking me if I ever thought about it. This was a test, and she set me up by getting me to dance with her, giving her an excuse to dance with Romeo inside. She asked what I was doing, and if I was just going to leave Amanda there. I affirmed that I intended to leave her. She grabbed my arm, feeling like a heel, and apologized. I reassured her, saying I didn't like being played any more than she did. She asked me to take her back to my house so she could get her car. As we were almost home, my phone buzzed, but I ignored it. Sibra gave me a look when her phone rang, and she answered it. She told Amanda they were almost at my house and explained that it wasn't her idea, she rode with us and wasn't about to be stranded. Sibra warned Amanda not to put her in that position and ended the call. She then informed me that Amanda wanted me to go back and get her. I expressed my desire for a wife who didn't play stupid games, sighing and questioning where this had come from. Sibra explained that it was Marcy from work who had been talking about having an open marriage, claiming it made their bed life better. She and her husband, Herb, hardly talked and spent their time trying to involve their friends. Amanda fell for it, and Sibra believed she was trying to set us up. I was surprised when Sibra mentioned that Amanda knew she loved me and had always been attracted to me. I nearly choked and apologized for the awkward situation. Sibra expressed that she found me gorgeous but emphasized being a one-woman kind of guy, not good at sharing toys. She reassured me, questioning why she should be sorry, as she had nothing to do with Amanda's actions. I had the opportunity to dance with my dream woman, and I felt no regret about it. I assured her that I would let her know what happened, and she left in her car. Entering the house, I thought for a moment, then gathered my belongings from the master bath and relocated them to the one in the guest room. I also retrieved my work items and placed them there. Locking the door, I went to sleep possibly aided by the drinks I'd consumed. I was partially awakened by the slamming door downstairs and echoing footsteps in the hallway. The doorknob to the bedroom twisted a few times, followed by a tap on the door. I heard Amanda's stage whisper, cautious not to disturb the nearby sleeping girls, asking what was going on. The tapping and whispering persisted for about 10 minutes before her footsteps retreated to our bedroom, or what used to be ours. Strangely, I found myself disliking the bed in the guest bedroom. In an attempt to slip away before she woke up, perhaps a coward's plan, I failed. She descended the stairs while I packed files into my briefcase. She sputtered, clearly angry, questioning what was wrong with me. I retorted, suggesting that maybe she should be asking herself that question. Her voice rose as she asked what that was supposed to mean. I picked up my briefcase, stating that everything I did was in reaction to what she did. I expressed not wanting to look at her right now, emphasizing how close she was to making me permanently angry. Instructing her to get her act together, ensure all her points were checked off, and be ready to talk about it when I got home, I mentioned that I would pick up the girls and take them to Mom's house to settle the matter. Her face went pale, and she claimed to have no idea what I was talking about, suggesting the possibility of having something planned for the night. I told her it was up to her, stating that if she was interested in fixing what's broken, she should be ready and stop with the excuses. I added that if she was fine with the way things were, she could do whatever she wanted. I concluded by telling her to move her belongings into the spare bedroom because I liked my bed, making it clear she wasn't welcome in the same bed as me. She puffed up, but I left her there and went to work. I picked up the girls from school, and they happily went to Graham's for the evening. I informed Mom that Amanda and I were having some problems and needed some time to ourselves. She hugged me and expressed her love. I was grateful not to have to answer a bunch of questions. Amanda was there when I got home. She had made cookies, and a plate of them and a cup of coffee awaited me. Standing up, she clung to me for a moment, kissed my cheek, and sat down beside me on the sofa. I helped myself to a cookie, oatmeal with chocolate chips and mandams. It seemed like we were off to a good start, and I hated to spoil all this amicability. I addressed Amanda, expressing my disapproval of the unpleasant situation she created the previous night. I emphasized that what she did was not only hurtful to me, but also embarrassing for both of us and disrespectful to Sebra, who was supposed to be her friend. Amanda had difficulty making eye contact and apologized for her actions. Reflecting on my own behavior, I recognized that I shouldn't have handled the situation that way. My intention had been to open up communication with her, as she had consistently shut me down before. I considered this approach a way for her to contemplate alternative perspectives. In response to my question about possibilities, Amanda hesitated briefly before blurting out that she had been thinking about trying to date other people. Responding to her revelation, I told her there were several problems with that idea, the first being that both of us happened to be married. She argued that other married people do it, citing open marriages as a way to strengthen love. Skeptical, I questioned her sources, asking for a name. She mentioned Marcy and Herb, claiming they have an open marriage and that it strengthened their relationship. I doubted the authenticity of her information and suggested looking it up on Google to verify. She seemed a little shocked but agreed to sit beside me as I fired up my laptop. After typing in how many people have open marriages and clicking on the first link, we discovered that, according to a survey, less than 1% of Americans have an open marriage. Checking several other links yielded the same result, less than 1%. She seemed to have anticipated something different and mentioned that it was still a significant number, estimating at least 3 million. I disagreed, expressing doubt that many children are married, open or otherwise. Suggesting a different approach, I proposed typing in how many Americans expect their partners to be faithful. After clicking the link, we discovered that more than 95% of Americans expect fidelity. I pondered, so what do you suppose that means? She opined, I guess that most people aren't very open-minded. I thought there'd be more people with alternative lifestyles. I hear about it all the time. I wonder how many of those open marriages end in divorce. Despite her reluctance, I insisted, well, I did, and I wanted her to know. I then typed in how many open marriages end in divorce. The answer revealed that 92% of open marriages end in divorce in 5 years or less. I analyzed the statistics, saying, okay, let's see. Less than 1% of Americans are in an open marriage. That means that out of 1 million people, fewer than 10,000 are in open marriages. 92% of open marriages end in divorce. That means that out of that 10,000, there are 800 that don't end in divorce in 5 years. That's 800 out of 1 million. I asked Amanda to do the calculations and consider the odds of success for open marriage, especially when 92% of 1% fail. She admitted that the chances weren't very good. I pointed out that the few successful ones are those where both parties are willing. I directed her to the screen, emphasizing that 100% of marriages where one party is coerced into it fail. I made it clear that our situation would fall into that category since I wasn't willing to participate. I explained how my feelings of resentment, competitiveness, jealousy, insecurity, betrayal, and lack of security would impact us if I were to allow this. I expressed that the only reason I would endure such painful absurdity is if I were desperate to keep her, but I reassured her that I'm not that desperate. I mentioned that other women are attracted to me, citing an encounter from the previous night. I stated that if I were a pathetic loser or a sick individual, I might be interested in playing her game. But I clarified that I'm not that man. I made it clear that I would prefer her to shoot me in the head than break my heart. Amanda weakly responded that she didn't think everything on the internet could be believed. I acknowledged her point, stating that a good bit of it was probably misinformation, especially the part about many people having open marriages, which I suggested she shouldn't believe. I questioned her trust in Marcy, asking if she believed everything Marcy told her, and pointed out Marcy's history of multiple divorces. When Amanda didn't know about Marcy's husband, I pressed further, learning that Marcy had been divorced 4 times. Incredulously, I remarked that Amanda was taking marriage advice from a 4-time loser, to which she protested, explaining that Marcy and Herb had a strong marriage. Expressing my disgust with the situation, I asked Amanda about the source of all this information. She revealed that Marcy talked about it all the time, and I also discovered that Marcy and Herb hardly spoke to each other, spending their time trying to engage in closeness activities with their friends. Expressing my frustration, I questioned Amanda about her actions, asking her how she thought this situation would end. When she suggested that our bed life had been stale lately, I disagreed, stating that I had been perfectly happy. I further pointed out that her desire to play games had made the situation weird, referencing the last time and how she had climaxed 6 times. I questioned if those were Marcy's ideas, and her expression confirmed they were. I reacted strongly, expressing disbelief and frustration, emphasizing our strong marriage and rejecting the idea. She argued that it could be good and exciting, suggesting we share experiences. I responded, calling it a nightmare and challenging her claim about men's fantasies, suggesting she Google it. I made it clear that any involvement in such matters would mean the end of our relationship. Amanda looked shocked and sought clarification on what "we're through" meant. She questioned if it meant divorce and expressed disappointment, believing our marriage meant more. I echoed her disappointment, expressing doubt about the strength of our marriage based on her discussion of such matters. I conveyed that her discussion of such matters made me believe our marriage didn't hold much significance for her. I questioned what she would tell our daughters about mom and dad potentially splitting up, refuting her notion that it would be because I couldn't accept her having other relationships. I asserted that the truth would be that their mother didn't love their father enough to keep her marriage vows and ensure a loving home for them. I accused her of prioritizing her desires over the well-being of our family. As our anger escalated, she asserted her determination for this to happen, stating it was inevitable. I responded, refusing to accept it, and warning of the consequences. I asserted that she was mistaken and emphasized that our marriage wouldn't survive her involvement with someone else, stating that I'd consult a lawyer the moment she went through with it. I presented her with options: forget everything for a quick divorce, or schedule therapy sessions to understand her irrational behavior. I expressed my skepticism about the success of counseling, labeling her actions as a major mistake that would make everyone miserable. I attributed her misguided ideas to Marcy's influence and warned that positive outcomes were unlikely. I made it clear that I wouldn't sit idly by, emphasizing the potential suffering for everyone involved. I questioned her about her plans and challenged her actions. She taunted me, insisting on her freedom, and claimed I couldn't stop her. She argued I wouldn't divorce her out of fear of losing too much, and threatened to take the girls and the house, leaving me with alimony and child support. In response to her taunts, I urged her to think about the situation and not do anything foolish. Despite her claims of love, I resisted her proposal, emphasizing that the potential excitement she suggested would only lead to risks and downsides. I stood firm, expressing the gravity of the situation and rejecting her plea to give it a try. She stood up, approached my chair, and tried to embrace and kiss me. I pushed her hands away, stood up, and said, "Don't touch me. I need to think about this. I'll let you know what I decide." I lied. I didn't need time to contemplate. I needed to organize my strategy. She was probably correct about the complexities of divorcing her. The whole system is messed up. I needed to make some moves. I left her, went to the master bedroom, and locked the door. After spending 30 minutes on the computer and 10 on the phone, I had a financial plan. The problem was the girls. Under Georgia law, where we lived in Atlanta, children over 14 get to choose their custodial parent. I was confident about Audra, my daddy's princess. Olivia loved me, but she also held her mother in high regard. I doubted Audra would go with Amanda, and I hoped Olivia wouldn't want to be separated from her sister. I was betting that if I could make them aware of Amanda's plans and how she intended to use them as leverage for this open marriage, they would want nothing to do with her. It was cynical, and I hated every thought I was having, but I wasn't the one changing the rules. If Amanda had come to me before our marriage, expressing her desire to remain faithful for 19 years and then explore other relationships, would I have married her? Absolutely not. I would have left immediately. She knew it, and she would have done the same. She wanted to change the rules and force me into compliance, resorting to extortion tactics. The conversation unfolded 2 nights later, with Amanda beginning by offering an apology that I wasn't inclined to accept. I questioned her about the decision to see a therapist and engage in marriage counseling when she denied having any issues and shifted the blame to me for planning to be with other men. I countered, pointing out the contradiction. She insisted she wasn't planning anything specific, just suggesting we have the option if it came up. In response, I shared a different perspective, revealing that I had opportunities to cheat occasionally throughout the years, but resisted due to a commitment to a plan of loyalty in marriage. I highlighted the importance of planning for a successful marriage and criticized her lack of commitment. I expressed concern about the impact on our promises to each other, our children, and even to God. Despite her hissing response, I questioned how the girls would perceive her betrayal, asserting that she wouldn't be telling them anything. Later that day, Amanda threatened that, as the mother, she would undoubtedly get custody of the kids, ensuring I would never see them again. She vowed to make visitations difficult, cautioning me not to say a word to them. After a heated exchange, she glared at me, stormed off, and created enough commotion for anyone on the stairs to hear. A couple of faint gasps and a muffled sob. When I reached the stairs, the girls were no longer there. I went to Audra's vacant room and proceeded down the hall to Olivia's room, where I heard hushed voices inside. Upon knocking, Olivia asked what I wanted and I requested to come in. She opened the door, and both of them had obviously been crying. Sitting between them, I embraced them both and expressed regret that they had to witness such a conversation. I explained to them my belief that they wouldn't believe me unless they heard the conversation themselves. Olivia reassured me, saying it wasn't my fault, placing the blame on her mother. She mentioned not initially believing me, but now understanding the situation. Audra expressed disbelief at her mother's actions, questioning how she could do such a thing to me and to them. I admitted not knowing the exact motivation, stating that Amanda had been influenced by negative influences at work and had made a firm decision to go through with it. I shared my unsuccessful attempts to dissuade her and mentioned her lack of concern. Concerned about her well-being, Audra asked if Amanda was unwell, to which I responded that I had no clue about her current motivations. I mentioned suggesting therapy and marriage counseling, but Amanda showed no interest. Audra asked what they should do, and I advised them to do nothing for the time being. I explained my plan to wait until Amanda believed I had given up, anticipating her going on a date. At that point, we would be prepared to leave. I expressed doubts about her willingness to listen, even if I attempted to talk her out of it. I asked both of them if they were aligned with my decision or if they wanted to stay with their mother. Audra exchanged glances with her sister before declaring, "No, Dad, we're going with you." My heart lifted, finding solace in the support of my children after 19 years of disappointment. Over the next 2 months, Amanda and I barely communicated, assuming roles of distant roommates who harbored little affection for each other. The spare bedroom became her sleeping quarters, while I occupied what had once been our shared space. Despite my efforts to engage her in conversation and dissuade her from her chosen path, our interactions were strained. One evening, as we worked together in the garden, I broached the subject. I questioned the success of her plan, asking if our marriage was truly strengthening, where the passionate lovemaking she had envisioned was, and if the situation was as exciting and fulfilling as she had anticipated. She glanced at me, and for the first time I noticed a hint of doubt in her eyes, quickly replaced by anger. She snapped back, asserting that the situation was a result of my behavior. I expressed my disapproval of my wife planning to engage with others, emphasizing that it wasn't a scenario I welcomed. In response, she insisted that I was the one at fault. During our heated exchange, she practically shouted that I needed to consider the positive aspects of the situation. According to her, everything could be perfect if I let go of my stubborn pride. I questioned the idea of perfection and for whom it would be ideal. From my perspective, the current situation was far from perfect and certainly not favorable for me. I challenged her assertion that she loved me more, emphasizing that my love for her was expressed through granting her freedom while maintaining my commitment. I perceived her desire for exploration and boundary pushing as selfishness rather than an expression of love. I made it clear that my love for her was reflected in my decision not to engage in relationships with others, and if she truly loved me, she would do the same. I questioned Amanda about when she stopped loving me, to which she tearfully denied it and claimed her love for me had grown stronger. I challenged her notion of love, suggesting that her actions felt like driving a stake into my heart. In response, she became furious, announcing her plan to go to a club with a colleague, Bill White, on Friday night. She insisted that I join them, promising it would be an exciting experience. Reluctantly, I agreed, stating that since she was going to do it anyway, I might as well go along. As she rushed across the garden, she embraced me tightly, expressing gratitude for my willingness to participate. Despite her assurances, I was already filled with regret, finding the situation unbearable. Contemplating seeking support from Sebra, I decided to give her a call. It became evident that Sebra was furious upon learning about the plan. She expressed her anger, stating that she had no idea she was being set up to be with me when Mandy invited her to go clubbing with Bill White. Upon hearing the slang number, she vowed to confront Mandy. When I requested her help and trust, assuring her that I needed her assistance in this critical moment as I was planning to leave Mandy, Sebra initially expressed her distrust. After calming her down, I explained my plan to pretend to be okay with the situation and asked her to play along by going home with me. She hesitated for a moment before asking what I had in mind. She laughed and questioned the sincerity of my plan, expressing doubt that it might be a devious plot to get her into my house. Amused, I admitted that it indeed was such a plan and clarified that I needed her assistance in moving the girls to my new place while I retrieved our belongings from the house. Surprisingly, she found the vengeful aspect of the plan appealing and agreed to participate. Throughout the week leading up to Friday, Amanda engaged in closeness moments as if there were no tomorrow. On Friday, I emphasized once more before heading to work whether she was absolutely certain about the decision and suggested she could still call off the plan. I reminded her of the enjoyable week we had spent together. However, she remained resolute, assuring me that we could discuss it afterward if needed. She expressed gratitude for my willingness to go along with her plan and assured me that the upcoming night would be the best yet. She danced her way out of the bedroom. She knew I was going to love this, right? I thought sourly. Let's get this day over with. When Sebra stopped by the house on Friday evening, she was absolutely stunning. Amanda was cute, petite, and slender, with a face that belonged on a teenager. Sebra was in a whole different league. She was tall, and she had one of those bubble butts you hear so much about and almost never see. Amanda was a bit flat back there. Sebra wore a short, tight red sheath dress adorned with sequins, looking stunning. I was dressed in a sport coat, black pants, and a ribbed t-shirt under the coat. As she entered, she playfully commented on my attire, suggesting that I was attempting to seduce her. I clarified that it was strictly business that evening, reserving any such intentions for another time. She expressed regret at the missed opportunity, mentioning that she was wearing a thong, believing it would be to my liking. Playfully, I asked her to show me, drawing her closer, my hands on the hem of her dress. I teasingly lifted it up her legs toward her enticing figure. She warned about Amanda potentially entering at any moment, but I insisted, emphasizing the need for Amanda to think I was participating in her game. We shared a moment of laughter as I continued the playful interaction. As I was about to appreciate the delightful view in front of me, Amanda entered the room unexpectedly. There was a moment of surprise, and Sebra quickly adjusted her dress. Amanda greeted us with a smile, commenting on the apparent early start to our evening. I responded with a playful suggestion that she and Bill should be the ones getting a room. Amanda smirked at us, picked up her clutch, and we headed out for the night. Bill met us at the club. I don't think the evening started the way he'd expected. I shook his hand and just crushed it. I've been powerlifting for years, and one thing it does if you lift without straps is it gives you quite a grip. I could see him start to go weak in the knees, and I let him go. You could tell he wanted to whimper and nurse his hand, but his macho image wouldn't let him. He was one of those pretty boys. Have you ever noticed that as men approach what some women would call ideal, the likelihood of there being a hairdresser or a Scientologist goes up to near infinity? Observing Bill, I drew a parallel with Tom Cruise. Curious, I inquired if he was a hairdresser, to which he chuckled and dismissed the idea, stating that hairdressers are predominantly gay. Acknowledging this, I brought up L. Ron Hubbard and revealed my affiliation with Scientology for 6 years, explaining that I was testing a theory. Sebra, having heard my theory before, was on the verge of choking and seemed ready to burst into laughter. Glancing at Amanda, who was visibly red with anger, I realized I might have shared too many private theories with Sebra. Deciding to change the subject, Sebra suggested finding a booth and marched away with a tense posture, with Mr. Bill trailing behind her at a safe distance. Once he was out of earshot, Sebra erupted into laughter, and I joined in. Acknowledging, "You're a mean man, Corwin," she said. "Yeah, well, this is a hell of a night," I responded, encouraging her to pull herself together and act like she was seducing me. Sebra played her part convincingly. By the time we reached the booth, I found myself thoroughly seduced. After dancing with her twice, she exhibited everything but engaging in a closeness act right on the dance floor. Amanda was occupied with Mr. Bill. During our return, I asked Sebra, "Are you ready for the big show?" She gazed up at me with those upturned eyes, an expression in them that conveyed this wasn't merely a game for her. They were enormous and radiant brown, and I found myself falling into their depths. I observed those full, lush lips slightly part, and her petite, pointed tongue moistened them. I couldn't resist. I had to taste her. It exceeded all my expectations and more. Suddenly, I heard a noise, and Amanda and Mr. Bill were sliding back into the booth. "Oh no," I exclaimed in my best Saturday Night Live voice impression. "Look who's back." Sebra caught on, and so did Amanda, but Mr. Bill remained oblivious. Sebra chuckled, advising against doing anything mean to him. Amanda's face changed, puffing up like a pufferfish, and the smug smirk disappeared. I informed them that Sebra and I were planning to leave. I suggested they have fun, and Amanda escorted us to the door. She inquired about my well-being, noting that I had been acting like an idiot earlier. I responded that I was not okay and urged Mandy to consider leaving now with me. I proposed going home and trying to work things out. I warned that if she stayed, it would be a permanent decision. She expressed her excitement, mentioning that this would be great for us, and advised me to go and enjoy myself, assuring it would be awesome. She encouraged me to avoid being an idiot. I retorted, implying her interest in Mr. Bill, not me, and stated that we were leaving. She grabbed my arm, insisting it would be a great experience, emphasizing that Sebra was interested in me. I questioned if she was spending the night with him, teasing about his stamina. She hesitated a bit, mentioning she might get home around midnight, planning to spice things up with Mr. Bill. I slapped myself on the forehead, remembering their plans. I told her to be quiet if Zebra and I were still engaged when she returned. She kissed me, and I hope she enjoyed it, knowing it would be the last one. I left and got into the car, where Zebra was waiting. She asked if I was sure about my decision, considering my long marriage. I sighed and affirmed that I was sure. She commented on my seemingly calm demeanor. Expressing surprise at my lack of distress, I explained that I had run out of emotional energy, having been upset for an extended period. I clarified that I was now just tired and sick, wanting the ordeal to be over. I mentioned that I had shed countless tears, but that time had passed, and it was now time to move on. I suggested going to get the girls. Upon arriving, we noticed the moving truck already being loaded. The girls were busy carrying their clothes downstairs and packing them in large plastic tubs. As for furniture, we were only taking essential items such as the bed from the master suite, the girls' beds, their TVs and electronics, and the big screen we had replaced 6 months ago with an even larger one. When the girls completed their packing, Sabra took them in her car, and they drove to our new place. It was as far from the old one as we could get while still remaining in the same school district. The guys finished packing, and I took a final look around. It appeared empty and silent, with only the ghosts of 19 years lingering. With a sigh, I removed my wedding ring and placed it on the kitchen table, alongside my cell phone. The girls' phones were already there, signaling it was time to leave. A sense of melancholy surrounded me. I was departing with a whimper, a few petty jabs at Amanda and Mr. Bill, and I was walking away from 19 years that had been pretty damn good. Oh well, stuff happens. I locked up, loaded my tools from the garage into the back of my truck, and departed. The girls were quite excited about the new place, especially with its backyard pool. They couldn't wait to try it out the next day. "Do you like that, baby?" I asked Audra. "Yeet," she said. I had no idea what yeet meant, but it sounded positive. Zebra was present, still looking amazing. However, even if she had been Jennifer Lawrence in the flesh, I was just tired. Not that I'd prefer Jennifer Lawrence to Zebra, but you know what I mean. I think she sensed that and gave me a dazzling smile, a quick peck on the cheek, and then she was gone. The lingering scent of her perfume was the only reminder that she had been there. We went to bed, and surprisingly, I slept. Not well, but I did sleep. The next morning I got up and made coffee, and the girls joined me. After a while, we had a Danish Kringle and chocolate milk for breakfast, and they watched cartoons on TV until noon. 2 gorgeous little bikini-clad bundles of energy were then splashing in the pool while I lounged and observed. I wasn't really paying attention, wondering what Mandy was doing. By now, she'd likely be frantic, calling everyone she could think of, trying to figure out what had happened. She was going to have a tough time finding us. I wasn't working. I had sold the business and made out well. The girls weren't in school, it was summer vacation. We weren't going anywhere except to the grocery store, and we walked or took a bus there. The truck was parked in the garage. I was sure she had the police looking for us, but not having a car would be problematic for them. The only way she could reach us was electronically. She flooded our inboxes with messages, immediately messaged the girls whenever they signed onto social media, and sent tweets and messages on Instagram. We read them but didn't respond. Let her find us the hard way. I anticipated that she would eventually look for me, considering she had work and bills to pay. I, on the other hand, wasn't making any payments, and I knew she would quickly fall behind. We had significant equity in the house, and losing it wouldn't be something she'd desire. About 3 weeks later, a private detective approached me in the grocery store. He inquired about my identity, to which I responded that my wife had hired him to find me. He declared his intention to inform her of my whereabouts and suggested I give her a call. Threateningly, he warned of charging me with stalking if he saw me around. Dismissing him, I told him to smack it, expressing no intention of reaching out to her. It turned out I didn't have to. The police showed up, and Mandy had fed them a line that I had kidnapped the girls. They requested me to go down to the station and sort it out. When I declined, they arrested me and took me downtown. The girls went in another car, and upon reaching the station, Amanda was there. She attempted to hug the girls, but they rejected her. They pushed her away, and a woman came to get them. Along with Amanda, they went into one room and I into another. The cops began questioning me aggressively. I provided my identification, noting that they already had my driver's license. The only words I uttered were a declaration of my intention to remain silent and my request to speak to an attorney. This statement silenced them, and I overheard one of them mentioning that I was lawyering up. They handed me a phone, and I called John Trimble, who arrived in 45 minutes as we had planned. It took approximately 3 hours to resolve everything. During the process, the girls affirmed that they were with me willingly and denied any kidnapping. They refused to speak to their mother. John took over from there, pointing out the absence of a court order on custody. He emphasized that under Georgia law, both parents were considered equal candidates for custody, and highlighted that children over 14 could choose the parent with whom they wanted to live. Ultimately, they had no choice but to let us go. Sebra walked out with us, and Amanda trailed behind, pleading with the girls to talk to her. They got in Sebra's car and drove away, leaving us alone in the parking lot. Amanda was crying buckets, appearing like a mess. She turned those forlorn eyes toward me and fell to her knees. I reminded her that I had previously begged her not to mess around with Mr. Bill, stating that she hadn't listened, so why should I? She continued pleading, asking me not to treat her this way and expressing sorrow. I agreed to talk, asking her where she wanted to go. She pleaded to go home, not wanting anyone to see her. Like this. I suggested going to my home as I had no interest in going to hers and didn't know who she had been involved with there. She gave a little wail of dismay but nodded her head, agreeing to go to my home. She said, "Okay, Corwin, whatever you want, but it's your home too." I didn't argue with her. She suggested that I ride with her, but I declined, opting to call a cab instead. She followed me home, knowing the girls were with Sebra, and spending the night. I welcomed Amanda in and got her a cup of coffee. We sat at the bar and an uncomfortable silence lingered. Silence hadn't been uncomfortable between us since our third date, but it sure was now. After a while, she asked what I wanted, and I countered by asking if I had mentioned wanting anything. She clarified, asking what she needed to do to get me to come home and see the girls. I responded that I had no control over her seeing the girls, it was their choice. She accused me of poisoning the girls against her and suggested Marcy might have told me about it. I inquired if Marcy was the oracle of all wisdom. She repeated her question, asking what I wanted. I noted that the funny thing was I hadn't said a word to the girls about her. The only thing I had told them was that I was leaving, and they needed to decide who they wanted to live with. When she pressed on, wondering who had told them, I revealed that she was the one who had told them. Confused, she asked when she would have said anything. I reminded her of the night in the living room when she threatened me, and I pointed out that the girls were sitting on the stairs overhearing every word she said. Her face went pale, and she started sobbing, unable to continue. I conveyed to her that the girls believed she had poisoned their perception, and I added that I also shared that belief. Her pleading was pitiful, reminiscent of my own. I responded callously, expressing indifference toward the situation with the girls, stating that she had messed it up and needed to fix it. When she asked what could be done with me, I suggested she file for divorce. She insisted that she didn't want a divorce, she just wanted me to come home. I asserted that I considered myself already at home, clarifying that I didn't live with her. She apologized, admitting it was a mistake to force me into the situation and expressing regret. She pleaded for forgiveness, proposing to go to a marriage counselor or a therapist. In response, I explained that the problem wasn't that I didn't want it, but that she did. I demanded that she file for divorce and warned her that if she didn't do so within a few months, I would take the initiative. I made it clear that I wanted nothing to do with her, considering our relationship irreparable. Angry, she called me a fool, accusing me of taking all our money by selling the business and emptying our bank accounts. I defended my actions, stating that I had sold the business at a significant loss and had taken only the money I had earned. I emphasized that I didn't have a dime of it left. All of that was indeed accurate. I had securely stashed the money away in an offshore account, realizing it was crucial to do so before the divorce proceedings began. The records indicated that I sold the business to a Danish company for an amount less than what I owed in taxes. I had intentionally overpaid the IRS significantly, with the surplus funds held to offset future tax liabilities. Our brokerage accounts remained untouched, although I recognized that I would have to relinquish half of them to secure the girls' financial future. I had initiated a trust for them, ensuring they would be financially comfortable for the next 3 months. As part of my strategy, I had been frequenting various grocery stores, Walmarts, and convenience stores in town. Using my debit card, I made a point to request cash back every time the machine prompted me to do so. I had been obtaining cash ranging between $160 and $200 from numerous stores in town, with 3 people involved in each transaction. This strategy had the potential to accumulate a significant amount quickly. The transactions were legitimate, and I had a substantial stack of cash stored in an old chest in a storage building, ready for use once the coast was clear. Addressing Amanda, I informed her that she could have the house. The equity built up in it was sufficient for her to sell, get out of the mortgage, and manage for a while. I suggested that after selling the house, she might consider moving in with Mr. Bill, wondering aloud about his wife's reaction to that prospect. Amanda gasped, claiming ignorance of his marital status. I pointed out that her desire for an open marriage indicated a lack of concern about his marital status and advised her to move on, urging her to file for divorce. Standing up and heading toward the door, I was followed by Amanda, who was visibly upset, wringing her hands and crying. She stopped at the door, looked up at me, and requested that I tell the girls that she loved them and apologized. I agreed to convey the message and asserted that I wasn't giving up. I clarified that I wasn't filing for divorce because I didn't want one, expressing my desire for her to come back home. She commented on my apparent lack of open-mindedness and expressed regret that she hadn't anticipated the situation turning out this way. She continued professing her love for me and declared her intention to keep trying. I was too tired to argue with her. I saw her out the door, took a minute to collect myself, and called Zebra. She brought the girls home, but she didn't come in. Audra and Olivia were very upset and even angrier with their mother than before, if that was possible. I knew they wouldn't be at all receptive to the message from Amanda I had for them, so I decided to just sit on it for a while. 2 days later, Amanda showed up at about 4:30 with dinner. She'd made chicken tetrazzini with French-cut green beans and a big basket of garlic bread. Olivia opened the door. Amanda tried to hug her and got a stiff arm for her troubles. Amanda greeted me, addressing me as baby, and Olivia called out for my attention. I heard Amanda expressing her apologies, professing love, and stating that she missed me. However, Olivia abruptly shut her down, refusing to hear any of it and instructing her to stay away. Amanda was visibly shaken, and as she nearly collapsed, I rescued the basket of food she was carrying. Taking her to the sofa, she sat down and buried her face in her hands, sobbing about how much she was hated. I acknowledged that what she did to the girls was hurtful and expressed doubt that they would trust her again. Despite sympathizing with her pain, I emphasized that rebuilding any relationship with the girls would be her responsibility, not theirs or mine. She mentioned making dinner and looked at me pleadingly. Despite recognizing that she brought it upon herself, I decided to help. I offered to talk to the girls while she found the dishes in the kitchen upstairs. The girls were furious, expressing disbelief at Amanda showing up and thinking that feeding them would make everything okay. Audra voiced her anger, stating that Amanda had destroyed their family. I empathized with Audra, explaining that Amanda had thrown in the hand grenade and now had to deal with the consequences. Despite Amanda's misguided perception that I was the problem, I reassured the girls that my love for them remained unchanged. I gave them the option to stay with me or be with their mother, emphasizing that my love for them would never waver. Olivia expressed her strong aversion to eating with her mother, stating that she'd rather hang herself. The girls affirmed their decision to stay with me, and we shared a hug. I proposed the idea of going down to eat with their mother and trying to be civil. Olivia asked if I wanted them to, and I expressed my desire for them to do so while avoiding mean comments. They agreed to be civil but intended to convey their feelings. The dinner turned out to be extremely awkward. Amanda tried to engage the girls in conversation, but they responded with curt replies. After the meal, we cleaned up, packed Amanda's dishes, and she prepared to leave. When Amanda asked Audra for a hug, Audra declined, stating that Amanda was no longer her mother. Both girls went to their rooms without saying another word. Amanda was visibly distraught, and it took her about 30 minutes to compose herself enough to leave. Despite feeling pity for her, I took no responsibility for the situation. I found satisfaction in the turn of events, enjoying every minute of it. She continued to come over about once a week, and the girls kept destroying her hopes. She didn't file for divorce and continued to try to talk me into moving back in with her. After 6 months, I filed. When the divorce was final, I think Amanda finally realized that we were through. The court gave her visitation rights, and somehow, every time she wanted to visit, there was something that did not let the visit happen. I certainly hope she found someone that suited her open life. I sure had. I am still unmarried, my life dedicated only to my girls.
Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the story. Let's start. Alexander Alex Carrington stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, surveying the city skyline. At 42, he cut an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. As the CEO of an international logistics company, Alex had built his empire through a relentless need for control and perfection. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Carrington, your son is here to see you." "Send him in," Alex replied, his stern expression softening slightly. 10-year-old Max bounded into the room, Claire's iPhone clutched in his small hands. Dad, what's a prenup? Alex froze, his blood running cold. Where did you hear that word, Max? It was in Mom's email, Max said innocently, holding up the phone. With forced casualness, Alex took the device from his son. His heart nearly stopped as he saw the email chain between Claire and her divorce lawyer. They were plotting to leave him, waiting for his father's inheritance. But something had changed. Max, why don't you go play in my secretary's office for a bit? Alex said, his voice tight. I need to talk to your mother. As Max left, Alex strode purposefully toward the elevator, his mind racing. He found Claire in their sprawling penthouse, lounging on a chaise with a fashion magazine. Care to explain this? Alex said, tossing the phone onto the coffee table. Claire's face drained of color as she saw the screen. She snatched the phone, her eyes darting between it and Alex. How dare you look through my private emails? Our son found it, Alex replied coldly. Now explain. Claire's shoulders sagged, then straightened as a cold smile played across her lips. I was waiting for your dad's inheritance, she said, her tone dripping with disdain. But plans change now. Alex felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. But he wasn't done. With a smile, he pulled out his own phone, showing Claire a series of damning photos. Her locked in an intimate embrace with Mark, one of his top employees and an old friend. You won't get a dime, Alex said softly. You cheated. Remember the prenup? Claire's shocked silence gave way to disbelief. How do you know? Without hesitation, Alex's voice turned to ice. You're done. Pack your things. Tonight. Claire, panicked, began to realize the magnitude of her mistake. But it was too late. Alex had already turned his back, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions. Mark Stevens sat in a dimly lit bar, nursing his third whiskey of the night. His phone buzzed incessantly. Claire's name flashing on the screen with increasingly frantic messages. He knew their plan had unraveled spectacularly. Across town, Claire paced in a luxury hotel room, her designer luggage a stark contrast to her disheveled appearance. She'd underestimated Alex, but she wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning, Alex strode into Carrington Logistics, employees scattering before his thunderous expression. In his office, he immediately called his head of security. I want Mark Stevens' access revoked. All of it. Now. His voice left no room for questions. But Mark was already a step ahead. Before his access was cut, he'd managed to funnel sensitive business information to several of Carrington Logistics' biggest competitors. Claire, meanwhile, was plotting her own revenge. With her sharp social skills, she began reaching out to her extensive network, spreading rumors about Alex's crumbling empire and tarnishing his once flawless image. As Alex sat in his office, reviewing the damage reports, his intercom buzzed. Mr. Carrington, there's a Victor Zorin on line 1 for you. Alex's eyes narrowed. Victor Zorin, the ruthless Russian oligarch who'd been eyeing his company for years. He picked up the phone, his voice cool and controlled. Zorin, what can I do for you? Ah, Alexander. Zorin's heavily accented voice oozed false sympathy. I heard about your recent troubles. Perhaps now is a good time to discuss that merger we've been dancing around. Alex's grip tightened on the phone. Carrington Logistics is not for sale, Zorin. Not now, not ever. As he hung up, Alex realized he wasn't just fighting a personal betrayal. This was a direct threat to his entire empire. Alex sat across from Liam Quinn, a brilliant but morally ambiguous investigator he'd hired to dig up dirt on Claire, Mark, and Zorin. Liam's findings were worse than he'd imagined. They'd been stealing from the company for months, Liam explained, sliding a file across the desk. They planned to bankrupt you, destroy your empire, and flee the country with the spoils. Alex's jaw clenched as he reviewed the evidence. At that moment, his phone rang. It was his CFO. Sir, we have a problem. Zorin's just launched a series of strategic moves that's crippling our supply chain. Hanging up, Alex knew he had to act fast. He arranged an emergency meeting with Zorin at an exclusive private club. The Russian oligarch sat across from him, smug and overconfident. "Your company is on its knees, Alexander. I'm offering to buy you out at a fraction of its worth. It's more than generous, considering the circumstances." Alex leaned forward. "You underestimate me, Zoran. This isn't over." As he left the meeting, Alex's mind was already formulating a plan. He'd not only survive this onslaught, but annihilate all his enemies in the process. Back at his office, Alex initiated his counterattack. Using the evidence Liam had uncovered, he filed a countersuit against Claire and Mark, accusing them of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. He then began systematically removing Mark's influence from within the company, firing his associates and cutting off his access to company funds. It was a surgical strike, precise and devastating. As night fell over the city, Alex stood at his office window, looking out at the empire he'd built. The battle had only just begun, but Alexander Carrington was a man who played to win, and win he would, no matter the cost. Claire Carrington stood in the middle of her rented apartment, surrounded by designer luggage that looked out of place in the modest space. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against her phone screen as she scrolled through her contacts. She needed an ally, someone who could help her turn the tables on Alex. Her finger hovered over a name, Andrea Wells, investigative journalist. A cold smile played across Claire's lips as she hit the call button. "Andrea, it's Claire Carrington. I have a story for you. How'd you like an exclusive on the dark side of Alexander Carrington's empire?" Across town, Alex sat in his office, reviewing the latest reports on the damage Claire and Mark had done. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Carrington, there's a Ms. Wells from the Tribune on line 1. She's asking for a comment on some allegations." Alex's eyes narrowed. So, the war had begun in earnest. He picked up the phone, his voice cool and controlled. "Ms. Wells, what can I do for you?" As Andrea laid out the accusations, corruption, abusive leadership, shady dealings, Alex listened silently, his mind already formulating a counter-strategy. When she finished, he spoke only 2 words. "No comment." He hung up and immediately dialed Liam Quinn. "I need everything you've got on Claire and Mark. Now." Days passed, and the city buzzed with rumors. Headlines screamed of Alex's alleged misdeeds, each more damning than the last. Claire watched from the sidelines, a smug smile on her face as she fed Andrea a steady stream of half-truths and fabrications. Mark, still smarting from his humiliating exit from Carrington Logistics, provided insider details that lent credibility to their claims. But Claire wasn't satisfied with merely tarnishing Alex's reputation. She wanted to hit him where it truly hurt. "I want full custody of Max," she told her lawyer, her voice hard. "Paint Alex as an unfit father. Use whatever means necessary." Max, caught in the crossfire, retreated into himself. At school, he overheard whispers about his father, saw the pitying looks from teachers. At home with Alex, he felt the tension, the barely contained fury that radiated from his father. He didn't understand what was happening, only that his world was falling apart. Alex, for his part, had anticipated this move. As Claire's lawyer filed for emergency custody, Alex's team was ready with a counterpunch. They leaked their own story to the press. A sordid tale of Claire's affair, her theft from the company, her manipulation of Max for her own gain. The public sympathy, fickle as always, began to shift. Claire found herself on the receiving end of scathing editorials and vicious social media posts. Her carefully cultivated image as the wronged wife crumbled. In the courtroom, Alex's lawyers were relentless. They presented evidence of Claire's infidelity, her attempts to circumvent the prenup, her plans to flee the country with company funds. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with steely eyes, listened impassively. When the gavel fell, Claire's world collapsed. Custody is awarded to the father, Alexander Carrington. The mother, Claire Carrington, is granted supervised visitation pending further review. Claire stumbled from the courtroom, her designer heels clicking on the marble floors. Outside, a sea of reporters waited, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. She pushed past them, her face a mask of despair and rage. Alex emerged moments later, Max's small hand clutched in his. He faced the cameras, his expression grim but composed. "Justice has been served," he said simply. "My son and I asked for privacy during this difficult time." As they drove away, Max looked up at his father. "Dad, is it over now?" Alex's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Not yet, son," he said softly, "but it will be soon." Mark Stevens sat in a dingy motel room, surrounded by empty whiskey bottles and crumpled papers. His laptop glowed in the dim light, displaying financial reports and internal memos from Carrington Logistics. He'd been poring over them for days, looking for a weakness, any chink in Alex's armor. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered warily. "Stevens. Mr. Stevens." The voice was heavily accented Russian. "I believe we have a mutual interest in Alexander Carrington's downfall." Mark sat up straighter. "Who is this?" "A friend. One who can provide the resources you need to finish what you started." It was Zoran. Mark's mind raced. This was it, his last chance to strike back at Alex. "I'm listening," he said. Across the city, in his penthouse office, Alex was in the middle of a video conference when alarms began blaring from his computer. Red warning messages flashed across multiple screens. "Sir," his head of IT's panicked voice came through the speakers. "We're under attack. Massive data breaches. Our logistics software is compromised. Shipments are being rerouted." Alex's face hardened. He'd been expecting this, but the scale of the attack was beyond anything he'd anticipated. "Initiate Protocol Omega," he ordered. "Now!" As Carrington Logistics descended into chaos, Alex remained eerily calm. He watched as shipments were delayed, contracts were breached, and the company's stock price plummeted. His phone rang incessantly, board members, partners, media outlets all demanding answers. In his secret command center, buried deep beneath the Carrington Tower, Alex monitored the situation. Liam Quinn stood beside him, relaying real-time intelligence. "It's Mark," Liam confirmed. "He's working with a team of elite hackers. But there's more. He's got backing from Zoran. Serious backing." Alex nodded, unsurprised. "And our countermeasures?" Liam grinned, a predatory smile that didn't reach his eyes. "In place and ready. Just say the word." Alex's finger hovered over a button on the console before him. He thought of Claire, of Mark, of all those who had betrayed him, of Max, caught in the middle of this war. His jaw clenched. "Execute," he said. Across the city, in his motel room, Mark was celebrating. His laptop showed the carnage unfolding at Carrington Logistics. Zoran was on speakerphone, his satisfaction evident even through the tinny sound. "Excellent work, Mr. Stevens," Zoran purred. "Carrington is finished. I'll have my people draw up the acquisition papers immediately." Mark grinned, pouring himself another drink. "Here's to the fall of Alexander Carrington," he toasted. But as he raised a glass to his lips, his screen went black. Then, line by line, text began to appear. "Did you really think it would be that easy, Mark?" Mark's blood ran cold. He recognized that writing style. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." His phone died. The lights flickered and went out. In the darkness, Mark heard heavy footsteps approaching his door. Zoran, in his lavish Moscow office, frowned as his connection with Mark was suddenly cut. He barked orders at his subordinates, demanding to know what was happening. But as reports began flooding in of frozen assets, of raids on his properties, of arrest warrants issued in multiple countries, he realized with growing horror that he'd underestimated Alexander Carrington for the last time. Back in New York, Alex watched impassively as FBI agents let a handcuffed Mark from the motel. On another screen, he saw Zoran being escorted from his office by Russian authorities. Liam whistled low. "Remind me never to get on your bad side, boss." Alex didn't respond. He stared at the screens, at the empire he'd saved, at the enemies he'd destroyed. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt empty, His phone buzzed. A text from Max. Dad, when are you coming home? Alex closed his eyes, suddenly weary. It's over, he said softly. Let's go home. Claire Carrington stood in the lobby of Carrington Tower, her designer outfit a stark contrast to her haggard appearance. She clutched her handbag like a lifeline as she approached the receptionist. I need to see Alex, Mr. Carrington, she said, her voice hoarse. Please, it's urgent. The receptionist's eyes widened in recognition, but she kept her composure. One moment, please. In his office, Alex was reviewing the final reports on the Zoran takedown when his intercom buzzed. Mr. Carrington, your ex-wife is here to see you. Alex's jaw clenched. He considered turning her away, but curiosity won out. Send her up. When Claire entered, Alex was standing by the window, his back to her. She took a hesitant step forward. Alex, Save it. He cut her off, turning to face her. His eyes were cold, devoid of any warmth or recognition. What do you want, Claire? She flinched at his tone, but pressed on. I've made a terrible mistake. I see that now. I'll leave Mark. I'll do anything. Please, just give me another chance. Alex laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that made Claire step back. Another chance? You tried to destroy me, Claire. You used our son as a pawn in your little game. And now what? You think you can bat your eyelashes and all will be forgiven. He moved to his desk, pressing a button. A holographic display sprang to life, showing social media feeds, news articles, financial reports. You're done, Claire. Your name is mud in every circle that matters. No one will hire you, partner with you, or even be seen with you in public. Claire's face crumpled as the reality of her situation sank in. What have you done? She whispered. I ruined you, Alex said simply. Just like you tried to ruin me. The difference is I succeeded. Tears streamed down Claire's face as she sank into a chair. What about Max? He needs his mother. Alex's expression hardened further. You lost the right to call yourself his mother when you used him to try and hurt me. He's better off without you. As if on cue, Alex's phone buzzed. A text from Mark's lawyer. Client willing to make deal. Full confession in exchange for reduced sentence. Alex showed the message to Claire, watching as the last bit of fight left her eyes. It's over, Claire. Mark's going to prison, and he's taking what's left of your reputation with him. Claire stood on shaky legs, her world collapsing around her. As she reached the door, Alex spoke one last time. Oh, and Claire? I bought out the Tribune. Andrea Wells won't be writing any more stories about me or you. The door closed behind her with a final, damning click. Alex turned back to the window, looking out over the city he now unquestionably ruled. He should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt hollow. His phone buzzed again. Max! Dad, can we have pizza tonight? A small smile tugged at Alex's lips. Perhaps not completely hollow after all. In a maximum security prison upstate, Mark Stevens sat in his cell, staring at the blank wall. His lawyer had just left, confirming that his plea deal had been accepted. He'd spend the next decade behind bars, but at least he'd avoided the life sentence Zoran was facing. As night fell over New York, 3 lives lay in ruins. Claire, once the toast of society, now a pariah, wandering the streets with nowhere to go. Mark, locked away, his ambitions turned to ash. And Zoran, his vast criminal empire dismantled, facing justice in a Russian court. And at the top of it all stood Alexander Carrington, the man who had orchestrated their downfall. He had won, utterly and completely. Victor Zoran stood at the window of his Moscow penthouse, a glass of vodka in his hand, staring out at the city lights. His reflection in the glass showed a man consumed by fury and obsession. Alexander Carrington had humiliated him, dismantled his operations, and left him a shell of his former self. But Zoran was far from finished. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It's done. The syndicate is ready. Zoran's lips curled into a cold smile. He'd spent months rebuilding his network, calling in favors from the darkest corners of the criminal underworld. Now, backed by an influential Eastern European crime syndicate, he was ready to strike back at Carrington with a vengeance. Across the ocean, Alex Carrington sat in his office, reviewing quarterly reports. The past few months had been quiet, too quiet. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Carrington, we have a situation." Alex's eyes narrowed. "What kind of situation?" "Sir, we're under attack. Massive cyber attacks across all our systems. Our firewalls are failing." Alex's jaw clenched. He'd been waiting for this. Initiate Protocol Omega. Now. But as the hours ticked by, it became clear that this was no ordinary attack. Zoran had learned from his past mistakes. This time, he wasn't just targeting Carrington Logistics. He was going after Alex's entire empire. Banks reported suspicious activities in Alex's accounts. Stock prices plummeted as sensitive information was leaked to the media. Investors panicked, pulling out in droves. Alex stood in his war room, surrounded by screens displaying the chaos unfolding across his businesses. Liam Quinn burst in. "Boss, it's worse than we thought. Zoran's got a team of corrupt lawyers filing international lawsuits against us. Environmental damage, labor violations, you name it. They're trying to bleed us dry." Alex's mind raced, calculating moves and countermoves. But before he could respond, another alert blared. "Sir," his head of security's voice crackled over the intercom. "We've detected an unauthorized entry at your private residence." "Max." The line went dead. For the first time in years, Alex felt a cold fear grip his heart. "Get me to the house. Now." The drive to his mansion was a blur. As they approached, Alex saw signs of a struggle. Broken glass, overturned furniture. He charged inside, calling for his son. "Dad!" Max's voice came from upstairs. Alex took the stairs 3 at a time, bursting into his son's room. Max was huddled in a corner, shaken but unharmed. Near the window lay a man in black, unconscious. "Are you okay?" Alex asked, pulling Max into a tight embrace. Max nodded, his voice muffled against his father's chest. "I remember what you taught me, about being prepared." Alex's throat tightened with a mixture of pride and guilt. He'd taught his son to be strong, to be a survivor. But at what cost? As security swarmed the house, Alex's phone rang. Unknown number, Mr. Carrington. Zoran's voice, smooth as silk. "I trust won't have your attention now." Alex's voice was cold fury. "You've made a grave mistake, Zoran." "Oh, I don't think so. This is just a beginning. I'm going to take everything from you, Carrington. Your money, your power, your legacy. And when you have nothing left, when you're broken and begging for mercy, then I'll end you." The line went dead. Alex looked at Max, still clinging to him, then at the chaos around them. For a moment, doubt crept in. Had he underestimated Zoran? Had his arrogance put everything and everyone he cared about at risk? But as quickly as it came, the doubt vanished, replaced by a cold, implacable resolve. Zoran wanted a war. He'd give him one. Alex turned to Liam, who stood waiting for orders. "Call the team. It's time we finish this, once and for all." The safe house was a nondescript brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, its basement converted into a high-tech command center. Alex sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by his most trusted advisors and operatives. Liam Quinn stood at his right hand, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "All right," Alex said, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "Zoran thinks he's got us on the ropes. It's time we show him how wrong he is. Liam, what have you got?" Liam tapped a tablet, and holographic displays sprang to life around the room. "We've identified the key players in Zoran's syndicate, his money men, his enforcers, his political connections. They're spread across Eastern Europe and Asia, but they all report to this man." A photo appeared, a severe-looking man with cold eyes. "Dmitry Volkov, Zoran's right-hand man and the architect of the cyber attacks against us. Alex studied the face, committing it to memory. And our plan, we hit them where it hurts, Liam said, a predatory grin spreading across his face. We've got teams ready to move on their money laundering operations in Cyprus, their weapon caches in Ukraine, their drug routes through Turkey. When we're done, Zoran's entire network will be in chaos. Alex nodded, then turned to his head of legal affairs. And the lawsuits? The lawyer smiled thinly. We've got countersuits ready to file in every jurisdiction. More importantly, we've uncovered evidence of judicial bribery. When this gets out, half the judges on Zoran's payroll will be facing charges of their own. One by one, Alex's team laid out their strategies. Financial attacks to freeze Zoran's assets. Media campaigns to turn public opinion. Backdoor diplomacy to ensure international cooperation in taking down the syndicate. As the meeting wound down, Alex stood. You all know what's at stake here. Zoran thinks he can destroy everything we've built. We're going to show him the true meaning of destruction. Execute the plan. No mercy, no quarter. The team dispersed, each member heading out to set the gears of Alex's counterattack in motion. But as they filed out, Liam hung back. Boss, there's one more thing, he said, his voice low. I think I've found a way to lure Zoran out into the open, but it's risky. Alex raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Liam outlined his plan. A false lead about a multi-billion-dollar deal in Dubai. Too tempting for Zoran to resist. But it would require Alex to put himself in the line of fire. It's dangerous, Liam finished. But if it works, we can end this once and for all. Alex was silent for a long moment, weighing the risks. Then he nodded. Do it, but make sure Max is secure. I won't let Zoran use him against me again. As Liam left to set the trap, Alex stood alone in the command center. He thought of Claire, of Mark, of all the enemies he'd vanquished to get here. Zoran was just the latest in a long line of those who'd underestimated him. He'd be the last. Thousands of miles away, in a luxurious Moscow apartment, Zoran received an encrypted message. His eyes widened as he read the details of Carrington's supposed deal in Dubai. Prepare the jet, he barked at his assistant. We're going to the Middle East. The pieces were in place. The final battle was about to begin. Days later, Alex stood in the opulent lobby of Dubai's most exclusive hotel, surrounded by the world's business elite. The trap was set. Now all he had to do was wait for Zoran to take the bait. He didn't have to wait long. A commotion at the entrance drew his attention. Victor Zoran strode in, flanked by bodyguards, his eyes scanning the room until they locked on Alex. For a moment, the two men stared at each other across the crowded lobby. Then Zoran smiled, a cold, predatory grin, and began making his way towards Alex. But before he could reach him, chaos erupted. Police swarmed in from every entrance, shouting orders in Arabic and English. Zoran's face contorted in rage as he realized he'd been set up. Carrington, he roared, lunging forward. But it was too late. Officers tackled him to the ground, snapping handcuffs around his wrists. Alex watched him passively as Zoran was led away, still shouting threats and obscenities. It was over. The man who had threatened everything he held dear was finished. As the dust settled, Alex's phone buzzed. A text from Liam. It's done. Volkov and the others are in custody. The syndicate is finished. Alex allowed himself a small smile. He'd won. Again. But as he looked around at the chaos he'd orchestrated, he felt no joy, no triumph. Just a hollow emptiness. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Max, Dad. Are you okay? When are you coming home? Alex closed his eyes, suddenly weary. It was time to go home. Time to face the consequences of the world he'd created. Months passed. The world watched in awe as Victor Zoran's criminal empire crumbled, its tentacles severed one by one. Alexander Carrington emerged from the ashes stronger than ever, his company's stock soaring to unprecedented heights. Alex stood in his newly renovated office, looking out over the city he now unquestionably ruled. The skyline was dotted with buildings bearing the Carrington name, a testament to his expanding empire. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. "Come in," he called, not turning around. Max entered, now a young man of 16, the spitting image of his father. "The board is waiting, Dad. They're ready for your presentation on the Zoran acquisitions." Alex nodded, allowing himself a small smile. He'd taken control of Zoran's legitimate business assets, expanding his reach into markets he'd only dreamed of before. His strategic mind had thrived in the aftermath of his victory, turning near defeat into unparalleled success. As they walked to the boardroom, Alex studied his son. Max had witnessed the darker side of his rise to power, had seen the ruthlessness required to survive in this world. But he'd also seen his father's intelligence, his resilience, his unwavering determination. "Remember, Max," Alex said as they paused outside the boardroom, "in this world, you're either the predator or the prey. Always be prepared. Always be 3 steps ahead." Max nodded, his eyes serious. "I know, Dad. You've taught me well." For a moment, Alex saw a flicker of something in his son's eyes, admiration mixed with caution. Max respected his father's strength, his ability to overcome any obstacle. But he was careful not to emulate the cold ruthlessness that had defined Alex's path to the top. As the board meeting progressed, Alex laid out his plans for further expansion. The other executives listened in awe and fear, knowing that to cross Alexander Carrington was to court destruction. He'd proven that with Claire, with Mark, with Zoran. Mercy and forgiveness were weaknesses he could no longer afford. Later that evening, Alex stood on the balcony of his penthouse, a glass of scotch in hand. The city sprawled before him, a glittering testament to his power. For the first time in his life, he felt truly untouchable. He thought back to the day Max had innocently asked about prenups, setting in motion the chain of events that had led him here. He felt no regret for the choices he'd made, the lives he'd destroyed. In his mind, they had been obstacles to overcome, nothing more. The world was a battlefield, and Alexander Carrington had emerged the undisputed victor. As the sun set over his empire, Alex allowed himself a rare, genuine smile. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of his reign, and he was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Behind him, he heard Max's footsteps. His son joined him at the railing, looking out over the city. "It's incredible, isn't it?" Max said softly. "Everything you've built." Alex nodded, putting an arm around his son's shoulders. "And someday, it'll all be yours." Max was silent for a moment, then turned to face his father. "Dad, do you ever wonder, was it worth it? The cost of getting here?" Alex met his son's gaze, seeing in it a warmth and humanity that he himself had long since abandoned. For a brief moment, he felt a flicker of doubt, but he pushed it aside. In this world, Max, you take what you want or watch someone else take it from you. I chose to take it. Remember that. Max nodded slowly, turning back to the view. But Alex saw the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between admiration for his father's achievements and unease at the methods used to attain them. In that moment, Alex realized that while he had conquered the world, there was one thing he might never fully possess: his son's unquestioning allegiance to his worldview. Max would forge his own path, shaped by but not beholden to his father's legacy. And strangely, Alex found he was okay with that. Perhaps it was Max's role to be the one thing his empire had lacked: a moral compass, a reminder of the humanity he'd sacrificed on his climb to the top. As night fell over the city, father and son stood side by side, overlooking the empire they would shape together. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities and challenges yet to come. Alexander Carrington had won his war. Now, with Max by his side, it was time to secure his legacy for generations to come. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.